everybody in this country, regardless of their ability to pay.
Thanks for listening. You can find more information about these topics at nursetalksite.com or nationalnursesunited.org.
This podcast is powered by National Nurses United, the
Our book today in the Thom Hartmann Book Club is Stand Up, Struggle Forward by Sanyika Shakur. This is a book that was written back in the late 90s, but it's still very, very timely. This is from the second chapter titled Class Antagonisms Inside the Fundamental Contradiction of National Oppression. Having just passed the 19th and quickly approaching the 20th anniversary of the LA Rebellion, we should be reminded here of what Rodney King whimpered as he stood in front of a bank of microphones surrounded by class enemies and neo-colonial politicians. We should remember how he'd been dressed in that non-threatening cardigan sweater, white shirt, and black tie, how his hair had been tortured into submission by a jerry curl. We should reflect as well upon how timid and spooked he looked, and on how concerned and stern those who flanked him were as well. That was a Kodak moment. It was staged to foster an image of contrition and resignation, submission, a victim. Rodney King had been led to believe, through a bourgeois sense of reasoning, that the rebellion was really about him, that the reason new Africans and Mexicanos took to the streets of South Central was the result of his filmed beating. That, of course, is typical of mechanical bourgeois thinking. What it's not typical of, however, is someone from the hood. And this cuts both ways. No one in the hoods and barrios ever thought it was about Rodney King. We'd all seen the film over and over like everyone else, but that was par for the course. We'd always seen that, long before anybody caught it on tape. Actually, we'd experienced much more than that. Why, it's safe to say that the hoods had gone to war with each other in vicious waves of internal, intra-class combat for much less than that. Though, because of a general colonial mentality which prevents the challenging of bottom-up oppression, the same hood forces will not, in any systemic way, wage war on the pigs, or for freedom, land, and socialism. Rodney King alone, and of his own accord, would not have thought to hold a press conference to ask the asinine question in the form of a whimpering request, can't we just all get along? The fact of the matter is, we are getting along. New Africans and Mexicanos are getting along just fine. What we couldn't understand was why he was admonishing us for getting at the exploiters of our communities. The impression he gave, with his handler's hands up his back like a ventriloquist troll, was that a race riot was going on, as if we had all begun to kill each other or burn and rob each other's homes. His handlers compelled him to send up a false flag, a diversion. But you see, this was the very thing that exposed the class interests and reactionary politics of the Uncle Toms that had been designated to handle him, and by extension, us. Let's go back for a minute. Let's talk social development, aka history. There exists a fundamental contradiction in our lives that, like an elephant in the room, no one wants to acknowledge. As a consequence of the war waged upon various African nations by European powers, those of us captured and kidnapped were taken out of our own self-determining social developments and violently forced into Euro-American history. This is not simply a clever play on words. This is a reality. We lost the ability to control our own destiny. Read that again. From that time until now, the fundamental basic contradiction between the U.S. oppressor nation and our own oppressed and colonized nation has been the governing imperialist relationship, which is to say, us not being in control of the qualitative factors that determine our lives as a people, as a nation. Our tradition of struggle against this fundamental contradiction has taken many forms, some hidden or obscured, some open and hostile. But all of these have been open to resolve the fundamental contradiction and to regain our independence. While there have been some bona fide struggles to resolve the contradiction, there have also been reactionary neocolonial struggles waged by internal enemies loyal to the oppressor nation and culture that have tried time and time again to subvert and control our destiny for the benefit of the capitalists. They've come among us, always imposed from above, stirring up emotions and giving lip service to progress, equality, justice, and prosperity. These always within the colonial confines of the oppressor's arrangements, and none collectively ever materialize, because without a resolution of the fundamental contradiction, that is the freeing of our productive forces from U.S. imperialism and the governing of our own affairs, will remain a minority within the American system as opposed to a majority in our own, and subjected to the established bourgeois social contract, i.e. colonialism, neo and post. We can parade all through the empire with black congressmen, black mayors, black governors, black police chiefs, black Supreme Court justices, hell, even a black president. And absolutely nothing will alter the genocidal relationship that governs our national oppression here, because the blacks are part of the colonial apparatus. They have made a strategic alliance with the capitalist imperialists to act as go-betweens in our oppression and exploitation. This is a conscious class stand. The black petty bourgeois is not innocently confused, like, say, Mrs. Jackson across the street is, about our national oppression, about the existence and subjugation of New Africa. They are well-read, have traveled in our experience. They've just chosen sides against us and in favor of our historical enemies. And the sooner we recognize and internalize this, the better off we'll be. Black ain't nothing but a color. As a designation of our national identity, it has played out. It is a superficial understanding at best and a foolish and dangerous analysis at worst. We have no collective control over the qualitative factors which determine our lives. We do not, in other words, control our destiny, not as a people or a state. The book is Stand Up, Struggle Forward by Sanyika Shakur. Want to connect with the show online? You can find the Thom Hartmann Program on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram.
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
Well, happy Tuesday. Thom Hartmann here with you. A lot going on. Tonight is the 10th, I believe, Democratic debate. I'm pretty sure it is. And this time, billionaire Tom Steyer has bought his way back in, so there will be one additional person on the stage. I think that takes it from 6 to 7. Might be 7 to 8, but whatever it is, you know, in addition to billionaire Bloomberg, you'll have billionaire Steyer. And meanwhile, Bernie Sanders has rolled out his plan to pay for absolutely everything he's proposing. Elizabeth Warren had done this some time ago. Now Bernie has. There's a lot of overlap between both of their proposals. Not much. It's not to say that they're identical, but you know, philosophically and structurally, they're very, very, very close. And it's just common sense. It's basically undoing Reaganomics. You know, prior to Ronald Reagan, the top tax rate in the United States was 74%. Reagan dropped that down to 28% in the 1980s. And that 74% top tax rate and the corporate tax rate was over 35%. During the Eisenhower administration, for example, corporate income taxes paid for fully 1/3 of the cost of government. Now it's down to like 5%. So basically, if we just roll back Reaganism, we've got enough money to pay for all these programs. And Bernie isn't even talking about really rolling back Reaganism. I mean, keep in mind, as I said, you know, the top tax rate during the Franklin D. Roosevelt administration was 91%. During the Harry Truman administration was 91%. Truman wasn't complaining about it. During the Eisenhower, all 8 years of Dwight Eisenhower, Republican, it was 91%. Dwight Eisenhower wasn't complaining about it. John Kennedy, 91%. Lyndon Johnson, 91%. Richard Nixon, 91%. Well, actually, Lyndon Johnson dropped it down to 74%. So then it became 74% for Richard Nixon, 74% for Jerry Ford, 74% for Jimmy Carter. And during that period of time, we had the most robust economy, the fastest growth of the American middle class, literally in the history of our country, which came to a screeching halt when when Ronald Reagan dropped that top tax rate. And this is, I mean, along with unions, the main driver of building that middle class was that top tax rate, because what it did was, instead of, you know, people accumulating more and more cash in their own private, you know, Swiss bank account, instead of the Jeff Bezos and Bill Gates of the world becoming, you know, multi billionaires. And keep in mind, $1 billion is $1 million 1,000 times. And then you get, you know, tens of billions of dollars. That's, you know, it's mind-boggling, the amounts of money. That just didn't used to happen, Because instead of taking the money out and sticking it in their checking account, or however they would do it, people like Mark Zuckerberg back in the day would reinvest that money in their company and pay their employees better. That top tax rate actually encouraged the growth of small and medium business, as well as made large businesses healthy. So Bernie has laid this out, and in a very straightforward fashion. And I'll just go through it very quickly for you. He wants to expand Social Security so that everybody on low-income senior citizens and people with disabilities will get an additional $1,300 a year by increasing benefits. How is he going to do this? He's going to have the wealthiest 1.8% of Americans, that's people who make more than $250,000 a year, pay the same Social Security tax that you pay and that I pay. And that, by the way, will extend the solvency of Social Security to 2070 and beyond. I mean, that's the end point for the math. He wants to end homelessness. That's going to cost $2.5 trillion. How does he do that? He puts a wealth tax on the top 0.1%. You have to have at least $32 million, and you are going to start paying a tax on your wealth, just like I pay and probably you pay a wealth tax on your property, on your house. And even if you're renting, you're paying a wealth tax. It's called a property tax. Every year, your house may be worth, say, $100,000, but every year, year after year after year, you still have to pay that property tax. That's a wealth tax that the middle class has been paying for generations. And all Bernie and Elizabeth Warren are both saying is, let's have the multimillionaires and billionaires pay a wealth tax on the money in their money bin. Right? If they want to take a deep dive and swim in their piles of money in their money bin, just pay a property tax on it. And we're not even talking about a property tax that's anywhere as high as what the middle class pays on real estate property. And this would be a property tax that's like, 0.1%, or at the most 1%, was Elizabeth Warren's suggestion. Universal pre-K, that'll cost $1.5 trillion. Again, that wealth tax will cover that. Eliminating medical debt. There's $81 billion in past due medical debt held by 79 million Americans. And Bernie just wants to completely pay that off. And how does he do that? With a income inequality tax on large corporations that pay their CEOs more than 50 times what their workers make. Keep in mind, when Ronald Reagan came into office in 1980, the average American CEO made 30 times what his lowest paid worker makes. Now it's hundreds to thousands of times. Bernie is saying if your company makes more than 50 times, or pays more than 50 times to your CEO, then that tax is going to go up. And that's going to pay for universal pre-K. The Green New Deal, this is $16.5 trillion. And he's going to pay for this by, number one, raising $3 trillion by making the fossil fuel industry pay for their pollution. Gee, what a novel idea. Secondly, generating $6.4 trillion in revenue from the wholesale energy that is produced by the power marketing administrations. By the way, if we replace our energy systems with renewable energies, after 2035, electricity will be virtually free outside of maintenance and operation costs. He wants to reduce defense spending by $1.2 trillion, but it's not just let's cut defense. Specifically, the part of defense spending that Bernie wants to cut is that $1.2 trillion a year that we spend protecting shipping lanes for oil coming to the United States. It's a subsidy to the oil industry. He wants to eliminate that. He'll pay for the Green New Deal with a $2.3 trillion in a new income tax revenue on the 20 million new jobs that are going to be created by the Green New Deal. This is sort of like the way that the GI Bill paid for itself back in the 40s, 50s, and 60s, was because people who went to college for free on the GI Bill made more in income, and so they paid more in taxes, and that's what, this is the same thing. And he's going to raise $2 trillion in revenue by having large corporations pay their fair share of taxes. And by the way, we'll save $70 trillion over the next 80 years if we can get global warming under control. And if we don't, it's going to cost us $34 trillion by the end of the century. He pays for his Medicare for all with a 4% income-based premium tax paid by employees who make more than $29,000 a year. If you make less than $29,000 a year, you pay nothing and you get complete health care. Make more than $29,000, it's a 4% tax. This is pretty much what you're paying right now as your Medicare tax. It might be slightly higher. I'm not sure exactly what the Medicare part of FICA is. But in 2018, the last year we have numbers for, the typical working family paid $6,015 in premiums. Under this option, the typical family of four is going to pay $1,240 a year in premiums. So the average family of four who makes more than $29,000 a year will save almost $5,000 a year, $4,700 a year. And if you make less than 29 grand a year, you pay nothing. And then he's going to, right now, employers also have to pay into FICA to cover the employer's portion of the Medicare costs. That will be a 7.5% tax. But if you have a small business like mine, I mean, I've got a small company here. We've got 4 or 5 employees. We've got I think 3 full-time employees and 4 or 5 part-time employees. And a company like ours that has less than $1 million in payroll will pay nothing, which will help small businesses. Boy, am I excited about that. Because in 2018, employers like me paid an average of $14,000 per employee in private health insurance premiums. And that's going to go to zero. So, I'll save money. And, and the average family will save $4,500. He's going to raise the top marginal income tax rate to 52% on income over $10 million. Keep in mind, it was at 74% when Ronald Reagan came into office. It was at 91% when Lyndon Johnson came into office. And the economy did better during that period of time than any time in the history of the United States. He's going to tax capital gains. In other words, Paris Hilton's sitting on her butt getting her dividend checks. That's how she makes her living. Right now, she pays almost nothing in taxes, 15%. He's going to raise that up to, you pay the same thing in tax. If you make your money with money, you're going to pay the same income taxes if you make your money laying bricks or doing a radio show or whatever it may be. He's going to close the loopholes in the estate tax. That'll raise money, $2.5 trillion over 10 years, and he's going to raise the corporate income tax rate to 35%. All of that will pay for the Green New Deal. And so, basically, and the math actually works. It all works. So just FYI, in our program today, Marion Smith, he is going to be with us. He's the executive director of Victims of Communism Memorial Foundation. He'll be with us at the bottom of the hour, and he's going to tell us how terrible Bernie Sanders is because he's a communist. This is going to be fascinating. And then in our second hour, Charles Sauer, the economist and president of the Market Institute and author of the new book, Profit Motive, he's going to be with us and telling us again how terrible socialism is. And so I'm going to be asking him, well, what part of our socialism you want to get rid of? Is Social Security, Medicare, disability, saving our environment, doing away with student debt, police, fire, public roads, public schools? What's it going to be? And in hour 3, we're going to be talking about building a middle class. And I've got some real solid stuff there. I also want to get into some conversations about what's going on with the coronavirus and the stock market and all that kind of stuff. So we have a big day today and a lot coming up. So please stick around with us. And we will be back in just a few minutes. I'll be taking your calls at 17, and it's almost 18 minutes past the hour here on the Thom Hartmann Program, occupying the media 3 hours a day, 5 days a week, as we defend America from the weapons of mass deception. So stick around. We'll be right back. A lot on our plate, a lot to talk about. Oh, and Bernie praising Cuba. Let me get to that too.
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
Actually, I think we'll get to that at the bottom of the hour when we're talking to our guest who's going to tell us that Bernie is a communist. That should be fascinating. But I've got a clip of Obama saying the same thing. Stick around. And welcome back. And let's see here. Trying to get my Free Speech TV callers. Patrick, watching Free Speech TV in Long Island, New York. Hey, Patrick, what's on your mind today?
Hey, Tom, how are you doing today?
I am great, but I'll get better.
You'll get better. I have a comment and a question. My first comment is on Bernie's just released financial projections, his taxes. He's going to be painted as he'll raise your taxes when the average person has nothing to do with this.
He's actually, if you make $29,000 a year or less, you're no longer going to be paying a Medicare FICA tax. So your taxes are actually going to go down.
Which will be fine.
But if you make $35 million a year or more, your taxes are going to go up. I'm sorry, Patrick.
Yeah, no, correct, as I said. But he'll be labeled with the tax or whatever.
Yeah, I don't think people are buying that crap anymore. I really don't.
I hope they don't, because as I said, for the average person, it has nothing to do with you unless you have a trust fund and a pool of the ground,
Yeah.
My question I wanted to ask was, how much money and staff has been cut from the various NIH, the CDC, the various medical agencies that we have set up to deal with something like this virus? And that's the question.
Trump has basically shut down. There were two major institutional bodies in the federal government. One was associated with the National Security Administration. The other was associated with the Department of Homeland Security. There were directors for both those programs. These were epidemic disease prevention programs and treating, dealing with epidemics. Mostly they were set up during the Obama administration during the outbreak of Ebola in Africa. One of them, I believe, goes back to the Bush administration also, and was also designed to deal with things like the Ebola outbreak. Trump nuked them both. He fired both those leaders. There was a third agency, and I'm going to get into the details of this a little later in the program here, Patrick.
Yeah, I know you mentioned that, yeah.
There is a third agency also that has been around for quite a while that Trump tried to zero out last year, and Congress wouldn't go along with it. Congress put it back in the budget. And so as of right now, what Trump has been doing is refusing to hire new people when people retire, or quit their jobs at that agency. So that agency is staffed at about half strength, and it's a relatively minor agency. So, and right now, nobody's in charge of this. You'd think that the Centers for Disease Control would be in charge of our response to the coronavirus. No. The decisions are actually being made by Mike Pompeo, who has absolutely no public health knowledge at all, or experience, and by the State Department. It was the State Department, for example, who decided to fly those coronavirus-infected people back into the United States. Trump is rather upset about that, by the way, because, he likes to be the fearmonger in chief. And, oh, my God, his own administration isn't helping with this. So
once again, under the president's duties are to protect and, safeguard the public, and we have somebody who's failed.
Well, not only has he failed terribly, but also without a national public health system, we are unprepared for any kind of serious problem. I mean, you've got right now as we speak, there are outbreaks of multi-drug resistant tuberculosis in both New York and Los Angeles that we're doing almost nothing about. You've got hookworm disease spreading across the American South as a result of poverty, and people have no access to health care because we have no national health care system. So we, of all the developed countries in the world, we are the least prepared to deal with an epidemic outbreak. Patrick, thanks for the call. It's great to hear from you, and thanks for watching Free Speech TV. We'll be right back 22 minutes past the hour. Our 1 hour free podcast recaps our show, and it's available wherever fine podcasts are found. And we have the full 3 hour podcast available over at thomhartmann.com if you want to really support our program. I wanted to just very quickly speak about the coronavirus as well. Actually, I think I'll get into this a little later on in the program. We've got a lot of callers, and this is big news, what Bernie has done, and let's just get into it. Tony in Puyallup, Washington. Hey, Tony, what's on your mind today? Tony, watching us on YouTube? I'm not hearing Tony. Okay, David in Los Angeles, listening on KPFK. Hey, David, what's up?
Good morning, Tom. Always a pleasure to talk to you. As your biggest French fan, I just wanted to thank you for your wonderful show.
Thank you.
Yes, so just a couple of observations about Bernie. I just wanted to tell your listeners that Bernie would be seen as a moderate in Europe, so that's one thing.
Yep.
So there's nothing communist about what he says. So when I heard like Mike Bloomberg calling him kind of communist, it's laughable. You know?
It is laughable.
Honestly, it's ridiculous. Second thing I wanted just to share with you quickly is that I noticed that Americans are extremely worried about paying more taxes, but something they don't realize, they pay way more fees than we do in Europe, you know. And
interesting.
And you know, yes, and that's a word that's being used to kind of deceive.
You just faded out, David. You just faded out. But what you were saying is in Europe, people don't pay as much in fees. You don't pay as much to register your car. You don't pay as much, you know, a lot of other fees don't immediately come to mind, but you do pay more in taxes. But you get a lot more for those taxes, David.
We do get a lot more, Tom, and especially when it comes, because, you know, Bernie is all about the universal health care, and in Europe, we do pay less fees, especially when it comes to for example, when you go to the hospital, when you get a surgery, you're going to pay maybe $15 to go to the hospital.
Oh, so there's basically no co-pays and no surprise billing and, you know, no in-network, out-of-network, all that other kind of nonsense. Basically, you get sick,
Absolutely.
You get treated, period. End of discussion.
Yes, indeed. Yes, indeed. You're a human being, and it should be a right and not a product.
Yeah. Okay. Sounds like a plan. David, thank you for the call. It's great to hear from you. David in Neckline, Wisconsin, says you want to disagree with me about what?
The wealth tax, and it's actually Mequon, Wisconsin.
Okay.
So you're correct in what you stated earlier, that property tax is a wealth tax. The difference is real estate is very stable. Obviously, you get taxed for the property and you get taxed for the land. And you can make a very easy assessment as to, you know, what the property is worth on a year-to-year basis. Whereas the wealth tax that you're speaking of, keep in mind, you're not paying income tax on your house. So the tax that you're talking about, you're already paying corporate tax, you're paying income taxes. Now you're talking about a wealth tax, but the difference is...
Well, wait, hang on just a second, David. I paid income tax on every single penny that I used to buy my house. If you're arguing double taxation, I'm not buying it.
Well, at the end of the day, you have to look as far as money and global. You can liquidate things a lot quicker in the financial sector than you can in the real estate sector. So I think it's conjecture that the money that he would raise would not actually be there, because if you look at like Italy and other countries in Europe, you have whole shadow economies because of the fact that they do have high VAT taxes and other things. So you have two different economies.
You're always going to have people evading taxes. We have that here in the United States. But the fact of the matter is, if somebody's sitting on more than $35 million in assets and they're confronted with a 1% wealth tax and they say, you know, I think I'll liquidate some of those assets to avoid paying that tax, and they put that money back into their company or they pay their employees better, I think that's a good thing. That's the whole point of it. David, thank you for the call. Sorry, I can't agree with you. We'll be up next with Marion Smith, the Executive Director of Victims of Communism.
You're listening to the Thom Hartmann Program. Call 202-808-9925.
Is communism coming to the United States soon? Let's find out. Well, happy Tuesday. It's the second day of the Free Speech TV fundraising drive. The Free Speech TV television network, if you happen to be watching us on YouTube or Facebook or Twitter Live, Free Speech TV is available on Dish and direct satellite systems. If you have those systems, you can find it right on your TV set. And they're also on the internet at freespeech.org, so check it out. But speaking to those of you who are watching us on Free Speech TV, this is how these fund drives. Free Speech TV is a nonprofit organization. They don't take money from big corporations, and this is how we fund this television network. And it's a substantial television network with millions of viewers all across the country. It's in tens of millions, I believe over 60 million homes, and then, of course, available on the internet worldwide. And it always amazes me how many people watch this program on Free Speech TV. So, cool news for today Today we have a $25,000 match. So your gift up to $25,000 will be doubled. Whether it's $5, $10, $50, $100, $1,000, $5,000, $25,000, your gift will be doubled. And special thanks to all the listeners who, or the viewers who got together and put this match together. That's Roberta in Arizona, Rocky and Julie in Michigan, Beth in North Carolina, Joe and Heidi in Colorado, Suzanne and Jean in Oregon, Bill and Madeline Medine, in Washington, Azra in Illinois, Deborah in Minnesota, Andrew in California, David and Ellen in New York, Gerhardt and Sonia in Wisconsin, Kevin in Illinois, Judy in Oregon, Terry in Texas, Camilla in North Carolina, Sandy and Stuart in California, and Janet in Illinois. And thank you so much. And when you call Free Speech TV to make your contribution, if you are a person of sufficient means to be able to toss in for a future match, be sure to let the people know on the other end of the line. As I mentioned yesterday, calls that come into Free Speech TV more than 10 minutes after our show starts are credited to our show, and some small part of that comes here to help support us in supplying this program to Free Speech TV, which, for the first, I don't know how many years we were on Free Speech TV, we absorbed all the cost, and now, some of our costs to provide our show to Free Speech TV are being picked up through your contributions, a piece of your contributions by Free Speech TV, which is great. So, you're not just supporting Free Speech TV, you're also helping support our program, which is very much appreciated. The telephone number to call to have your match, to have your donation doubled is 877-378-8669, 877-378-8669. And the premiums, the gifts that Free Speech TV will send you in exchange for making a contribution include a Thom Hartmann University bumper sticker, proud student of Thom Hartmann University. I saw one of these on a car in, there was one on a car in Minneapolis and there was one on a car in Seattle last week when I was traveling around the country doing the book tour for the hidden history of the war on voting, the Republican war on voting. Also with a $20 gift, you could also choose the car magnet to get the vote out. And, it's kind of a cool car magnet. It doesn't look like what you just saw on the screen. We've got to get an actual graphic of it. The canvas tote bag is $50, and it says "Just effing vote." Just get out, just effing vote. The Thom Hartmann mug is with a $75 gift. That's and it says "Tag, you're it." With a $240 gift, which can be $20 a month for a year, or $240 up front. We have a virtual meet and greet where we all meet on Zoom or Skype or whatever it is, and have an off-the-record conversation where we can use words that we wouldn't normally use on the air, and I can say things that I might be a little more politic about on the air, and you can too. And we've had some fascinating conversations. I've had some fascinating conversations with some of our viewers on a whole wide range of issues. That's with a $240 gift. With a $300 gift, you get my new book, The Hidden History of the War on Voting, Who Stole Your Vote and How to Get It Back. It's a brand new book. It's just out in the last couple of weeks, and it'll be autographed by the author. It'll have an autographed book plate in it. With a $360 gift, you get an autographed set of the first 3 of the Hidden History books. The 4th one is on Monopoly, and it'll be out this fall. So we'll use it for the fall fund drive. But the first 3 are available right now in bookstores and available to you with a $360 gift, all autographed by me, and that can be $30 a month for a year. And with a $1,000 gift, come here to Portland, and on your own dime. I'm sorry. But I'll buy you lunch, and come on in and hang out with us for the last hour of our show, and be part of our peanut gallery. And I have met some of the most fascinating people through these meet and greets. It's really great. So those are the premiums. Bottom line, please help Free Speech TV continue providing really good progressive programming, my show and a whole bunch of great other programs, by calling 877-378-8669, 877-378-8669, and call now to credit our show for that. Thank you so much. Coming up in the Science Revolution this week, I explain why biodiversity matters and what happens when we lose biodiversity. Margaret Butler from the Extinction Rebellion is here about the activists fighting against oil trains and what happened to them. Dr. David Reichmuth also joins me on the impact of electric cars and find out why people are adding mushrooms to their coffee. That's the Science Revolution, wherever fine podcasts are available. Welcome back. Thom Hartmann here with you. And on the line with us is Marion Smith. Marion is the executive director of the Victims of Communism Memorial Foundation, a beautiful website, victimsofcommunism.org. And the Twitter handle is Smith Marion, M-A-R-I-O-N. Marion, welcome to the program.
Thanks for having me on.
Thanks for joining us. I am no fan of communism. I lived for a year in West Germany, right on the border with East Germany. In fact, in the spring, when we were in Herchheim, literally, I mean, the border was 80 or 90 yards from the back of our house. And as the ground thawed in the spring, the landmines that the East Germans had put in between the two giant rows of fence would the earth would move as it thawed, and it would set off the landmines, and we'd be woken up as the sun came up with the explosions in our backyard. My daughter and I visited East Berlin and spent a day there, and not a place I'd want. And my wife and I visited Moscow back when it was the Soviet Union. Not a good place, not a good system. But I understand that you are concerned that some of the Democrats and some of our millennials want to go to that kind of system. Do I have that right? The press release I got from you essentially says that in fact, I'll quote from it. In America, socialism and communism mean for those on the left the same thing. And the latest poll shows that 70% of millennials say they'd vote for a socialist. Explain.
Well, it is true that there is a sort of all-time high in positive opinions of both socialism and communism. And we have conducted a poll with YouGov for the last 4 years, and the most recent findings we published in this past fall. And yes, it did find that 70% say they would either vote for a socialist or a communist. That breakdown, and this is millennials and Gen Zers, 50% say they'd vote for a socialist, 20% say vote for a communist. And yet,
but hang on just a second, 20% of Americans, anytime you get down into those low percentages, 20% of Americans don't know the three branch. Actually, it's more like 60% of Americans don't know the three branches of government. 20% of Americans believe just like crazy stuff. Like the Earth is flat. That's like 17% of Americans will poll to that. So 20% of Americans say they vote for communism. Doesn't seem real impressive to me. But socialism, what part of socialism is it that you don't like? Do you want to do away with, I drove on our socialist roads to get to work here today, protected by our socialist police departments. My home is safe while I'm at work and my office here is safe because we have a socialist fire department. I'm able to read your press release because I went to a socialist public school. What part of socialism is it that you so hate?
Well, on the poll numbers, so those are numbers reflecting the opinions of those under the age of 37, 38. So Gen Zers and millennials. And when you compare that to generations above them, you see this drastic shift.
Well, that's because young people don't remember the communism of the Soviet Union. It was terrible stuff. But they're frankly, I think that they're starting to learn about the communism of China. You've got 1 million people in concentration camps right now, the Uyghurs that the Chinese have there. That's communism. But that's not what any of our Democratic candidates are talking about. I mean, your press release here says that Bernie Sanders is pushing this stuff. He's talking nicely about Fidel Castro.
To be clear, the system putting 1 to 3 million Muslim Uyghurs in concentration camps is called socialism with Chinese characteristics. So neither you nor I get to redefine the intellectual and the historical meaning of socialism and communism. And that, I think, is the concern for many Americans who see a sort of normalization of the term socialism, and for those who understand that in the Union of Soviet Socialist Republics and all of the Soviet and socialist workers' parties throughout Central and Eastern Europe, They understood themselves to be socialists trying to get to the end state of communism. And so I do not subscribe to the idea that there is this vast distinction between socialism and communism. Marx didn't think so, Lenin didn't think so, and each of the regimes in the some 40 nations ruled by communist parties trying to make socialist policies work, they didn't think so either.
I would submit that those were different times and those words had different meanings back then. And we had no experience in the from the 1860s forward after Karl Marx's, after Das Kapital was published. We had no experience of actual communism and the horrors of actual communism. The only communism we'd experienced basically was a kibbutz in Israel, which was kind of a friendly communism. But
and I've actually lived on a kibbutz for a time in Israel, and I am a full endorser of all of the voluntary socialist experiments that have existed for hundreds of years.
Sure, but they only work in small societies. When society gets large enough that politicians can behave in fraudulent fashion, as they did in the Soviet Union, that's where communism really starts to break down. And I think we're going to agree on that. I would like to get to your criticism of Bernie Sanders. You argued that because on 60 Minutes a couple nights ago, and Mike Bloomberg has been making the same argument, that Bernie pointed out that when Castro came to power, he gave people free education. The illiteracy rate in Cuba was, as I recall, well over 70%. And now it's less than 1%, less than 1 or 2%. It's everybody in Cuba is literate. And my wife and I visited Cuba last year, spent a week there, and even the poorest of people have perfect teeth and everybody has good health. Their child mortality rate is actually lower than the United States. Their lifespan is equivalent to or higher than the United States. So in those two areas, they've done a good thing, I would think. And here's a clip of Bernie Sanders talking about that.
And I said this to President Castro in Cuba. I said, look, you've made great progress in educating young people. Every child in Cuba gets a basic education. That's a huge improvement from where it was. Medical care. The life expectancy of Cubans is equivalent to the United States, despite it being a very poor country, because they have access to health care. That's a huge achievement. They should be congratulated. But you drive around Havana and this economy is not working. It looks like it did in the 1950s. And so you have to be practical in asking yourself, how can you achieve the goals of equality and inclusion?
So, my apologies. That was not Bernie Sanders saying that. That was Barack Obama saying it. But Bernie Sanders' words were almost verbatim the same thing. So what's wrong with that? Outside of the fact that Bernie was even more emphatic. He said, the Castro administration and the current administration, they're tyrants, they're dictators. We condemn them. What's your problem with it?
Well, the problem is you cannot trust the Cuban Communist Party's statistics. So anybody who cites those as the sole source of any information about life inside of Cuba is relying on, verifiably inaccurate information. The second thing is that the life expectancy for a political dissident in Cuba is well below global averages.
And that's what we're all attacking. I agree with you.
And when it comes to literacy, you might have some more people who can read than before 1959, but they're not free to read what they want. And even for those who still can't read in Cuba, because I can introduce you to some people in rural provinces in Cuba who have been punished for trying to set up schools in underserved communities there. But even for those people who cannot read, they are not allowed to talk about things that are deemed to be a threat to the Communist Party.
Agreed, and these are the things that Bernie Sanders criticized.
Why praise the Cuban Communist Party? I mean, if you look at what they have supported in Venezuela, they have turned that country. There is less literacy. There is less health care.
Venezuela is melting down, and Bernie Sanders recently called Maduro a dictator there as well. But when President Obama was praising the fact that the Cubans had universal education and universal health care, He was simply stating a fact. I mean, we may not like what it is that they're learning in their schools.
Universal health care is not a fact of life in Cuba. It's a propaganda talking point.
It wasn't the Cuba I saw. Have you been there?
You had minders, and you were not allowed to take a Jeep and go into the interior.
We absolutely did.
You were not allowed to.
We absolutely did. We were driving all over the country all by ourselves.
Then you should have met some people I would have introduced you to who could have given you the other side of the story. And these people exist, and they were excluded from
I know that there are dissidents who are opposed to the system. But this just seems like, hyperbolic hysteria, frankly. No Democratic candidate is suggesting that the United States should adopt the Cuban political system. None. And as far as education and healthcare goes, it's the Cuban system is also the Denmark system, the Sweden system, the Norway system, the France system, the Germany system. I
don't agree with that.
Pick your European country.
No, I don't agree with that.
The Canadian system.
The leaders of Scandinavia and Denmark deny that. They do not say they're a socialist system. They're a market economy, a democracy. And when Bernie Sanders in 2016
they call it democratic
socialist country, the Prime Minister of Denmark said that's not true. There is a difference between advocating high-tax welfare policies, which many Western European countries do, and instituting a more Marxist idea of socialism that denies the idea of individual rights in favor of collective justice. And when a candidate asked 20 years ago what they view as socialism, and they point to Venezuela and Cuba, that tells you what they view socialism to be in reality.
Yeah, and I get that. Marion Smith is the Executive Director of Victims of Communism Memorial Foundation. Victimsofcommunism.org is the website. You can tweet him at SmithMarion, Marion. Marion, thanks for dropping by.
Hey, good to talk. Thanks.
Yeah, back at you.
You're listening to Thom Hartmann. Visit ThomHartmann.com for audio and video archives.
We'll be back with your calls and thoughts on all this right after the break. Interesting to hear Obama saying what Bernie's being criticized for, huh? And welcome back. Thom Hartmann here with you. And let's see here. David in Los Angeles. Hey, David, what's on your mind today?
Yes, Tom, what I originally picked up to called you for was this thing with the pandemic. Mm-hmm. But before I touch on that real quickly, Tom.
Sure.
When we're doing history, see, during the time of the Cold War, America was in the height of apartheid or Jim Crow.
You're right.
This was a time to which colonialism, including here in South and throughout the world, South America and throughout the world, colonialism was a state of affairs. Mm-hmm. Cuba was the little playground, a little whore under Batista,
sure, for the mafia with Batista. He was stripping his people. I mean, people were literally dying of hunger in Cuba when Batista was president.
We do history. With all of this Cold War nonsense, this jingoism, elementary Americana pox of madness, right?
Yeah.
It's history, which is nonsense. And further, and then I'll go over to this. The prison population in the United States, with 5% of the population, we got millions of people in prison today.
Right.
We have hundreds of millions of people without medical today.
Yes.
And this takes me to this pandemic that seems to be shooting throughout the world.
Okay.
With no so-called socialist medicine here in the United States, I fear for our survival if something like that occurred. Because this nonsense that we have in the way of a patchwork of pay for service medical, mm-hmm. right? With all of the people already dying, with no pandemic or no epidemic, right?
Yep.
I pray, and I'm a praying man, that this thing that's happening in China and in Italy, where they have some degree of socialized medicine, we will be up the creek without a pedal.
Yeah, I get it, and I know that you were naming the TV show and not saying something obscene, so we'll just.
Yes, sir.
Yeah,
you
okay.
got it, brother. But that's it.
Okay. Yeah, I agree with you, and I think that, and David, thank you for the call, and I'm going to let you go here, because you did say something you shouldn't say, arguably, although I think Sean dumped it. But in any case, the simple reality is that the thing that provides resilience to a nation is a national healthcare system, resilience in the face of a possible epidemic or pandemic. And not only, and President Obama got us a whole lot closer to that with the Affordable Care Act. And now you've got 20 some odd Republican-controlled states and the Trump administration suing at the Supreme Court. The Supreme Court has said we're going to move this back until after the election so nobody knows about it, but suing to allow health insurance companies to start denying coverage to people because of pre-existing conditions and because they've cost more than $1 million in their lifetime. This is what Trump wants to bring back to America. And this is just so wrong. And without a national healthcare system, we are far more vulnerable to that coronavirus epidemic than, frankly, any of the other developed countries in the world. We'll be right back. Hey, did you know that Hillary Clinton actually won Pennsylvania, Wisconsin, North Carolina, and Florida in the 2016 election? It's on page 92 of my new book, The Hidden History of the War on Voting. Welcome back. Thom Hartmann here with you. David in Chicago. Hey, David, what's up?
Hi, Tom. How are you today?
I am great, but I'll get better. What's on your mind?
I just wanted to get your opinion on. It seems like there's a lot of fighting between, what side people lie politically on.
Right.
And I just wanted to get your opinion on trying to hear other voices. If you're liberal and you watch MSNBC all day, you only get half of the story. If you're conservative and you only listen to Fox News all day, you only get that side of the story. And obviously, you're.
What half of the story are liberals who watch MSNBC missing?
Off the top of my head, I would say more facts about gun control. Personally, that's a big issue for me.
What facts about gun control are not being discussed on CNN or MSNBC?
Well, first, this isn't what I called to talk about.
No, but you made this assertion. I agree with you that Fox News regularly lies to their viewers, misinforms their viewers, and in fact, 2 different university studies have found that people who watch Fox News not only have a lower level of information about the actual events of the day than do people who watch no news, but they actually believe things not to be true, which is not the case for people who get their news from other sources. I have my own personal criticisms of CNN and MSNBC, but go ahead.
That's why I feel like you should have a fair and balanced appetite.
Well, that's why I'm asking you to be fair and balance what you're saying. Tell me what MSNBC is missing. I'll tell you what I think they're missing. They're not talking about monopolies in corporations. They're not talking about media monopolies. They're not talking about breaking up big media monopolies. They're not talking about how our tax rates have wiping out our tax rates has made a whole bunch of billionaires and has destroyed the middle class. They're not talking about the things that giant corporations, frankly, would rather you not talk about. They're not talking about net neutrality, which they lobbied against. Those are the topics you won't hear discussed on CNN or MSNBC. I'll put that right out there. But, gun control, no. I hear lots of conversation about gun control, pro and con on both networks. But anyhow, David, that's not what you called about, is it? It says here polarization in politics.
No, I actually wanted to get the polarization of politics. And I specifically 2 of the most polarizing people on the right, I just wanted your personal opinion on them, Steven Crowder and Ben Shapiro. I wanted to know if you personally thought that their outlets are something that the average person should be listening
to. David, I just have no idea. I used to debate Ben back 10 years ago. He hasn't been on the show in forever, and I have not, caught either of their programs. So, got nothing there for it. for you. Alicio in Los Angeles. Hey, Alicio, what's on your mind today?
Oh, hello, Tom. I'm really a big admirer of your program, and I really love what you do, and thank you for that. First of all, pardon my English. I'm really bad at it, but
your English is better than my Spanish or German, so you're doing good.
Well, my question, Tom, is that we have always criticized Cuba, and we have always said that it is a really bad system. My question is, how do we know how the Cuban system the communism would have progressed if the United States had put that embargo, right away after Batista? And
I agree. And Obama tried to fix this, to his credit, and Obama went to Cuba. He was the first American president to go to Cuba since the overthrow of Batista. And, he went to Cuba and he spoke well of Cuba, and he spoke well of their education and healthcare system, and he spoke well of the fact that they have largely dialed back on the political repression, and also they're allowing limited capitalism. You can start your own business, you can start your own store, you can start your own restaurant.
Absolutely.
You just can't serve more than 50 people, and you can't own more than one business. And I think this is all great. I mean, when I was in Cuba, when Louise and I were in Cuba a year ago, March, we were just very, very impressed. And now, of course, Trump has reversed all that stuff, as a sop to his to the Marco Rubio crowd, to the right-wing Cubans in Florida who want their money back that Castro took away, that they had made under Batista. But
absolutely no, and I agree with that. Is the thing is that we criticize the system, but we really don't know how it would have progressed if it wasn't only the embargo, but the propaganda against the system.
Yeah.
The propaganda has been so horrendous that we really don't know.
I agree. I agree with you, Alicia.
I read about the system, and I read about socialism, anarchism, and all those ism stuff. But the real truth is that we don't know if it wasn't for the embargo and the propaganda.
I think it's very possible that had there not been an embargo and had there been a lot of American tourists going to Cuba, even during the darkest days, that Cuba would have opened up and would have changed itself, and it would have been a good thing. No doubt about it. Thanks a lot for the call, Alicia. George in Garden City, Kansas. George, I just have 30 seconds till we're going to hit a break. You got a quick one here for me?
Yeah. Real quick, your previous guest, Marion.
Yeah.
I think he's just bringing back the Red Scare. There's a communist under every bed, just like like in the 50s. And if and when Bernie wins the nomination, I hope he does, there is going to be such a campaign by just people like him, and that's just going to snowball, and they're just going to hang that kind of crap all over Bernie.
I agree, George. That's why I gave you a preview of it today. Get ready.
Okay, well, you keep it up. Thanks.
Okay, bye. Thanks a lot, George. Good to hear from you. And this is, and of course, let's keep in mind, the Republicans called Franklin Roosevelt a communist. They called Harry Truman a communist. They called Jack Kennedy a communist. They called Lyndon Johnson a communist. They called Jimmy Carter a communist. They called Ted Kennedy a communist. And they are going to call whoever the Democratic nominee is a communist. And it was BS back then, and it's BS now. We'll be back. We're going to talk with Charles Sauer about socialism. Stick around.
You're listening to Thom Hartmann.
We say fight back!
We have a special video up over at ThomHartmann.com for supporters of our program, and it's about how a letter that the IRS sent out to 3.9 million Americans saved 700 lives. And you're like, wait a minute, the IRS saved 700 lives? How did that happen? Well, it had to do with Obamacare, and it's a fascinating story. And it turns out that this analysis of this IRS mailing was actually the first time that the federal government has done a study that actually proved that people having access to health care produces fewer deaths. For every 1,648 people who got the letter, there was one fewer premature death. I'll explain the whole thing in the video. It's you know, as I said, it's available over at ThomHartmann.com for people who are regular supporters of our program, and it is really worth checking out. And it's a great ad, essentially, for our national health care system. Well, happy Tuesday. It's the second day of the Free Speech TV fundraising drive. The Free Speech TV television network, if you happen to be watching us on YouTube or Facebook or Twitter Live, Free Speech TV is available on Dish and direct satellite systems. If you have those systems, you can find it right on your TV set. And they're also on the internet at freespeech.org, so check it out. But speaking to those of you who are watching us on Free Speech TV, this is how these fund drives, Free Speech TV is a nonprofit organization. They don't take money from big corporations, and this is how we fund this television network. And it's a substantial television network with millions of viewers all across the country. It's in tens of millions, I believe over 60 million homes, and then, of course, available on the internet worldwide. And it always amazes me how many people watch this program on Free Speech TV. So, cool news for today. Today we have a $25,000 match. So your gift up to $25,000 will be doubled. Whether it's $5, $10, $50, $100, $1,000, $5,000, $25,000, your gift will be doubled. And special thanks to all the listeners who, or the viewers who got together and put this match together. That's Roberta in Arizona, Rocky and Julie in Michigan, Beth in North Carolina, Joe and Heidi in Colorado, Suzanne and Jean in Oregon, Bill and Madeline Medine, in Washington, Azra in Illinois, Deborah in Minnesota, Andrew in California, David and Ellen in New York, Gerhardt and Sonia in Wisconsin, Kevin in Illinois, Judy in Oregon, Terry in Texas, Camilla in North Carolina, Sandy and Stuart in California, and Janet in Illinois. And thank you so much. And when you call Free Speech TV to make your contribution, if you are a person of sufficient means to be able to toss in for a future match, be sure to let the people know on the other end of the line. As I mentioned yesterday, calls that come into Free Speech TV more than 10 minutes after our show starts are credited to our show, and some small part of that comes here to help support us in supplying this program to Free Speech TV, which, you know, for the first, I don't know how many years we were on Free Speech TV, we absorbed all the cost, and now, you know, some of our costs to provide our show to Free Speech TV are being picked up through your contributions, a piece of your contributions by Free Speech TV, which is great. So, you know, you're not just supporting Free Speech TV, you're also helping support our program, which is very much appreciated. The telephone number to call to have your match, to have your donation doubled is 877-378-8669, 877-378-8669. And the premiums, the gifts that Free Speech TV will send you in exchange for making a contribution include a Thom Hartmann University bumper sticker, proud student of Thom Hartmann University. I saw one of these on a car in, well, there was one on a car in Minneapolis and there was one on a car in Seattle last week when I was traveling around the country doing the book tour for the hidden history of the war on voting, the Republican war on voting. Also with a $20 gift, you could also choose the car magnet to get the vote out. And, you know, it's kind of a cool car magnet. It doesn't look like what you just saw on the screen. We've got to get an actual graphic of it. The canvas tote bag is $50, and it says "Just effing vote." Just get out, just effing vote. The Thom Hartmann mug is with a $75 gift. That's and it says "Tag You're It." With a $240 gift, which can be $20 a month for a year, or $240 up front. We have a virtual meet and greet where we all meet on Zoom or Skype or whatever it is, and have an off-the-record conversation where we can use words that we wouldn't normally use on the air, and I can say things that I might be a little more politic about on the air, and you can too. And we've had some fascinating conversations. I've had some fascinating conversations with some of our viewers on a whole wide range of issues. That's with a $240 gift. With a $300 gift, you get my new book, The Hidden History of the War on Voting, Who Stole Your Vote and How to Get It Back. It's a brand new book. It's just out in the last couple of weeks, and it'll be autographed by the author. It'll have an autographed book plate in it. With a $360 gift, you get an autographed set. First 3 of the Hidden History books. The 4th one is on Monopoly, and it'll be out this fall. So we'll use it for the fall fund drive. But the first 3 are available right now in bookstores and available to you with a $360 gift, all autographed by me, and that can be $30 a month for a year. And with a $1,000 gift, come here to Portland, and on your own dime. I'm sorry, but I'll buy you lunch, and come on in and hang out with us for the last hour of our show, and be part of our peanut gallery. And I have met some of the most fascinating people through these meet and greets. It's really great. So those are the premiums. Bottom line, please help Free Speech TV continue providing really good progressive programming, my show and a whole bunch of great other programs, by calling 877-378-8669, 877-378-8669, and call now to credit our show for that. Thank you so much.
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
And welcome back. Thom Hartmann here with you. On the line with us is our old buddy Charles Sauer. He is a libertarian and economist, and he is the president of the Market Institute in Washington, D.C., which is where I got to know Charles. MarketInstitute.org is the website. He's also the author of a new book, Profit Motive, What Drives the Things We Do. Charles, welcome back to the program.
Thanks for having me back on.
And I should say your Skype handle, correct me if I've got this wrong, is Charles.D.Sauer, S-A-U-E-R. Do I have that right?
That is correct.
Cool. Okay. So you don't like socialism, I take it. And I'm just wondering, what part of American socialism is it that you think that we should be getting rid of? Is it Social Security? Is it Medicare? Is it disability insurance? These are all socialist programs. Is it subsidies to green companies? Is it subsidies to the fossil fuel industry? Do you want to do away with do you think we shouldn't be doing away with the student debt? Do you want to get rid of our socialist police or our socialist fire departments or our socialist public schools? Where do we begin building this libertarian paradise that you envision, Charles?
Well, I think that my answer to that is yes. We can get rid of all of that, but I think that you do ask the important question. It's where do we begin? Because if you got rid of all of that overnight, it's going to be chaos. And I think that even when you get to the end, most libertarians, most economists will agree that things like the police and firemen are a good thing, and they're in a good, efficient use of government.
So you like a little socialism?
I maybe you can say that. I'll tell you what I do like. I do like all of the goals of socialism, and I think that that's why you and I get along. We think that people should be as good off as they can be. We're not going to walk past somebody that's broke on the street and kick them. So we both agree that we want to reach our hands out and help them up. Where I disagree with socialism is that I don't believe in the dream world that you hold all economics static when you just give away other people's money. I believe that there are dynamic effects. When you take somebody's money away, that they change their actions, and therefore the socialist economy is a dream world that doesn't exist. So I believe in capitalism, to help people. I believe in capitalism to help people up. And I think that we see that is the better way. But socialists, government gets too big. We saw Elizabeth Warren, and I'm sorry, I'm talking too long, but Elizabeth Warren the other night on the debate stage said that she wanted the government to take over mining. And then when pushed on a follow-up question, quickly made an exemption for a metal that was needed. And that's the way lobbying works, and that's the way socialism works. You just switch the power from a capitalist market where demand changes things to a government-controlled market where lobbying and cronyism changes things. And so I would much rather have a market dictate exemptions.
So, you make a good point. When people take away your money, it does change your behavior. I remember back in the 1970s, I had an herbal tea company in East Lansing, Michigan, or in Okemos, Michigan. And we had a couple of really, really good years before Celestial Seasonings ate our lunch. And I was making a pile of money. And I was, 22 years old, 23 years old. And I remember our CPA sitting me down along with Louise and saying, and my business partner Terry O'Connor, and saying, you guys are pushing up against a 50% income tax bracket. It is crazy for you to keep taking money out of this company and giving that much of it to the government. I would suggest that you put this money back into your business. And we developed a whole brand new product line which allowed the company to survive another couple of years. And we gave all of our employees health care. We gave people raises. I mean, it did change our behavior, and it changed the behavior of CEOs all over America. The top tax rate at that point in time was 74%, and I mean, this was before Reagan came into office, and you could get there fairly quickly. And so what happened was the average CEO in America took only 30 times what the lowest paid employee does. Now you've got CEOs in the banking industry taking 100,000 times what their lowest paid employees are, in the pharmaceutical industry taking 10,000 times what their lowest paid employees are, in the health insurance industry taking 10 to 70,000 times what their lowest paid employers are taking. I think that we should have policies that cause people to behave in ways that are good for business. Don't you, Charles?
Well, here's the thing. You're only telling half the story because, I do think we should have policies that have employers work in the most efficient way. And the most efficient way is to treat their employers right. But the fact is when you go back to the tax regime that you were talking about, we had people taking tax breaks for lunches with their spouses. We had people taking tax breaks for a lot of things. So, no, you can't you only get half of your meal deduction, and I don't believe it includes spouses. There's lots of things that were going on back then. So the 30 times number is, again, why I don't like socialism, because lobbyists came in and lobbied for these tax breaks based on cronyism, like, hey, I need to hide my money someplace. And they were given tax exemptions. So, yes, you're right. When you look at the top numbers, they were only making 30 times. But when you peel back the onion, you start seeing that we were in the exact same place, if not worse, than where we are now, because
that's not true.
We can at least see the numbers.
No, in 1980, Charles, more than 60% of Americans were solidly in the middle class. We dropped below 50% last year. We have not had basically an income increase since 1980, whereas from 1930 until 1980, during that 4-decade period, 30s, 40s, 50s, 60s, 70s, 5-decade period. During that period of time, we saw the economy growing faster than it has since Reaganism began. We saw the average wage of working people grow faster, and in fact, it was growing faster than it was for the top 1%. The wages were tracking productivity right up until 1980, and then wages went flat and productivity continued to go up.
If you look at numbers with a little spyglass and a little peephole, which is what you have to do to make socialism work, then your numbers are correct. But the fact is if you look at the quality of life for all income brackets, the quality of life is going up because innovation's going up, competition's going up. TV prices have come down. Housing prices are reasonable again. They are exploding again. Charles. But we had in the right before 2008, housing was increasing at dramatic rates. So even after we came down,
well,
we
that's
still
all
had more
post-Reaganism.
housing.
I mean, you go back pre-Reaganism, when we had reasonable interest rates and reasonable taxes, and the cost of housing was growing at basically the rate of GDP growth and inflation. Since then, we've seen the cost of housing explode. You've got over 40% of Americans spending more than 50% of their income on housing right now. That was definitely not the case in 1980.
And if you base that on your arguments, that shouldn't be happening. That should be like China building fake cities. But the fact is more people have money that can buy houses, Tom.
Charles,
No.
So here's the fundamental
question. But that's
question.
what the numbers you're using. The numbers you're using.
Yeah, I can give you examples.
The numbers you're using.
I can give you examples of democratic socialism actually working and producing good, positive results. And I know that you may disagree with how it works, but you understand. You've traveled around the world. People in Denmark are happy. They've got, with democratic socialism, they've got free education, they've got free health care, they've got free child care, they got a year off, for maternity leaves and paternity leaves and things like that. That is also true of Norway. That's also true of Sweden. It's also true of Denmark. It's also true of France and Germany. And, basically the only country in Europe that's been kneecapped since the 1980s is the United Kingdom. And they're having many of the same problems we are. So I can point to lots and lots of examples where Bernie Sanders-style democratic socialism, and in all those cases, by the way, they're going farther than what Bernie is suggesting right now, actually has produced a positive result. Can you point to any country in the world where your libertarianism, where there is no Social Security, it's just private savings, where there is no Medicare or Medicaid, it's you negotiate with a private health insurance company, where there is no public education, you go to school if your parents can afford to pay for it. Can you point to any country in the world where your form of libertarianism has been tried and succeeded?
Well, look. First off, you're wrong by pointing at those countries and saying that that's the case, because when you poll those countries, most of them say it's the capitalist portions of their economy that are what make it good.
I'm not disputing that.
But
that's not libertarianism. That's regulated capitalism, Charles.
No, you just pointed at what, 10 places and said that that's proof that what you believe works, and that's
democratic socialism, which includes highly regulated capitalism. Yes. Can you point to any country in the world where you have unregulated capitalism and functionally no social safety net? I'll give you the police and fire. You agree with me on that? Any country in the world that works.
I don't get full capitalism. What we look is that in the United States, we have a very a reasonably capitalist society, and we get drugs 12, 18, 24 months ahead of other countries because the research and development is done here, because there's intellectual property is protected, because we have a good research and development.
I'm not talking about drugs. I'm talking about any country in the world where libertarianism has been tried and actually works.
Innovation happens because of capitalism. Innovation happens because of libertarianism.
The majority of drugs in the United States are developed by the National Institutes of Health, Charles. The only ones that are developed by the drug companies are where they're tweaking an existing molecule to extend their patent. And that's BS, and you know it too.
That's absolutely not true, and we've actually talked about that. Because what we look at is they do basic research, but before you and your regulations would let somebody actually take it in the market, there's a lot of steps that have to take place, as you know, because you've called for regulations like that. Okay. The fact is that research and development happens here because we have a capitalist society. Research and development doesn't happen in democratically
I'm not trying to trash
places.
Capitalism. Charles, forgive my interrupting, but I'm looking at the clock, and I got 45 seconds before I hit a break that I can't stop. If Bernie Sanders becomes president, what kind of horror show are you predicting?
You and I have talked about Bernie. I actually like Bernie. Again, him and I agree with the end goal. We just don't agree on how to get there. And the fact is that Bernie Sanders has proven to work with people across the party aisles. Again, he's a good guy. I don't agree with how he wants to get places, but it's not going to be a horror show. He believes in what he believes, and he's believed in it for a long time, and he tells the truth when he's out on the campaign stage.
Wow. I agree with you. I agree with you. And that is why we're friends, Charles. Charles Sauer is the president of the Market Institute in Washington, D.C. He's an economist and libertarian. And his new book is called Profit Motive, What Drives the Things We Do. It's a fascinating read. MarketInstitute.org is the website. His Twitter handle is Charles Sauer, S-A-U-E-R. Oh, that was Skype. I'm sorry. I gave the wrong address. Charles Sauer is his Twitter handle. Charles, thanks so much for being with us today.
Thank you, Tom.
Great talking with you. We'll be back. We'll continue this conversation and
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
And I want to get into a discussion about the coronavirus. We'll do that in about 4 minutes after the break, so stick around. Welcome back. Erica in Seattle, listening on KBCS. Hey, Erica, what's on your mind today?
Oh, hey, Tom. So I'm switching the topic, and I just wanted to reference the guy who was talking early about the socialism scare and how the younger generation, the iGeners, millennials are voting or are polling towards socialism. And I just want to say that those people are these young people are the future of the country, and they should not be neglected. And they basically, this is a wake-up call. Mm-hmm. And they're letting everyone know that they're not happy with the status quo and that things have to change. And these are the people that are the future of the country, and the politicians need to be listening to them.
I agree.
And not brushing them off.
I absolutely agree, and I think that's very well said. I totally agree, and frankly, I don't think any of these people are calling for communism. I mean, it's red baiting. It's look under your bed and be afraid. Erica, thank you. Well said. Donna in Groveland, California. Hey, Donna, thank you for watching Free Speech TV. What's on your mind?
Thank you, Tom, for having such a valuable program. I really appreciate it.
We do our best.
I just called to make a short statement. I had two friends from Chile that came here after what happened there in the 1970s. And when Allende, when he was shot and killed, savage capitalism was imposed on the population by way of disappearing people, murder, and torture. Right. All of this for neoliberal policies. It was the destruction of their social security system and the privatization of their education, just to name a few things.
That was the libertarian experiment, by the way. I didn't want to shove that down Charles's throat, but that the Chicago school went down, and this is Milton Friedman who was pushing this stuff.
Oh, he was very instrumental in the destruction.
Yes.
And yet I never hear condemnation of the Pinochet regime from our libertarian and neoliberal figures in this country. What happened to those people?
Well, they're sort of saying the same thing about Pinochet that I would say about Castro, which is, he did some good things, but he was essentially a bad guy.
Well, I'm hard pressed to see anything good that Pinochet did for Chile.
Yeah, well, but from a libertarian point of view, he privatized Social Security. He killed off the public schools. He ended, what little they had of the equivalent of a Medicare program. I mean, he tried to take that country into a free market economy. The people protested. Over 3,000 of them were taken up in helicopters and dropped, from 3,000 feet and killed. Their bodies were buried in the soccer stadium. I mean, it was a horror show, and that's what you've got to do if you want to take socialism away from people. If you want to take their Social Security away, they're going to get seriously pissed off and they're going to protest.
My friend's brother was in one of their detention camps. The food was served deliberately with maggots and whatnot in the food.
Oh my God.
His brother developed an aversion to eating. When I met him, he was profoundly skinny. My friend Federico said, "Don't be alarmed. This is why he's so skinny, and he hasn't been able to eat normally since." Anyway, I just wanted to pass that along. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you, Donna. An amazing story.
Bye-bye.
Yep, we'll be right back. It is 22 minutes past the hour and a little bit of change there. Stick around. It's the Thom Hartmann Program, the place where smart people get their news. We'll be right back with more. We're going to talk about the coronavirus, as I said, so stick around. Our 1 hour free podcast recaps our show, and it's available wherever fine podcasts are found. And we have the full 3 hour podcast available over at thomhartmann.com if you want to really support our program. Welcome back. Thom Hartmann here with you. Let's have a reasonable, rational, common sense conversation about this whole coronavirus thing. The Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, just an hour or so ago, came out and said, brace yourself. Americans, brace yourself. This is coming. Dr. Nancy Messimer, the director of the National Center for Immunization and Respiratory Diseases at the Centers for Disease Control, said, and I quote, "It's not so much a question of if this will happen in this country anymore, but a question of when this will happen." She went on to say, "We are asking the American public to prepare for the expectation that this might be bad." Now, this particular virus, this COVID-19 virus, and it's got a few other names, but let's call it the Wuhan virus to make it simple, is part of the family of coronaviruses. The coronavirus A family of viruses are the common cold and all these rhinoviruses that we constantly get, where you get a runny nose for a week, or you're sneezing, or you get a sore throat. They take dozens of different forms because there's literally hundreds of different variations on the coronavirus A's. And we get them, and they're obnoxious, and we recover from them just fine. And one of the things that we know about coronavirus A is that immunity is not lasting. It's not like the measles, where once you get it, you'll never get it again. We get it every single year. Sometimes we get it 2 or 3 times a year because we don't have lasting immunity. Now, that's a concern about the coronavirus B family, which is what the Wuhan virus was part of. It's what SARS was part of. It's what MERS is, which is the disease that came out of camels that they're having problems with right now in Saudi Arabia and the Middle East, which is even more deadly than the Wuhan virus. But right now, so far, it seems to be limited to the Middle East. But, you know, it may be that we don't develop immunity, and that every year there's going to be the cold, flu, and Wuhan virus season. So what do we do about this? How do we as individuals deal with it? Well, first of all, how do we as a country deal with it? I mean, so now we've got the president who told us that the way to deal with forest fires is to rake the forest. The way to fix the cathedral in France being on fire is to drop water bombs on it, which would have, of course, destroyed it. And the way to stop a hurricane coming to the United States is to set off a nuclear bomb inside it. That guy just told us yesterday, don't worry, everything's good. And, just be happy and keep the stock market going up. But the fact of the matter is that Italy has now locked down 50,000 people in 10 northern towns. The coronavirus cases outside of China have doubled every 5.5 days since January. In the U.S., we were at 34 confirmed cases last week. We now have 53 confirmed cases. But where it gets really spooky is that Rear Admiral Tim Zeimer, who was the senior director for global health security, the guy inside the White House in the National Security Council who was in charge of our response to an explosive epidemic, he was fired in 2018 by Trump and never replaced. John Bolton didn't just remove Zeimer, he eliminated the position altogether. The entire National Security Council's Global Health Security Unit, it is gone. Bolton also forced out Tom Bossert, a highly regarded expert, this is from the Shiro newsletter, who was Zimmer's counterpart at the DHS, the Department of Homeland Security. So neither Foreign Policy magazine reported it back in January that neither the NSC nor the DHS epidemic teams have been replaced. And Trump slashed funding for the CDC's epidemic efforts. So we've got a real problem here. What do we do? I'll give you some suggestions after the break, and then we'll pick up your phone calls. Stick around.
You're listening to the Thom Hartmann Program. Call 202-808-9925.
We'll be right back. We'll finish what I hope is a reasonable and rational conversation about this coronavirus thing, and then pick up your phone calls on all the topics of the day. Well, happy Tuesday. It's the second day of the Free Speech TV fundraising drive. The Free Speech TV television network, if you happen to be watching us on YouTube or Facebook or Twitter Live, Free Speech TV is available on Dish and direct satellite systems. If you have those systems, you can find it right on your TV set. And they're also on the internet at freespeech.org, so check it out. But speaking to those of you who are watching us on Free Speech TV, This is how these fund drives. Free Speech TV is a nonprofit organization. They don't take money from big corporations, and this is how we fund this television network. And it's a substantial television network with millions of viewers all across the country. It's in tens of millions, I believe over 60 million homes, and then, of course, available on the internet worldwide. And it always amazes me how many people watch this program on Free Speech TV. So, cool news for today. Today we have a $25,000 match. So your gift up to $25,000 will be doubled. Whether it's $5, $10, $50, $100, $1,000, $5,000, $25,000, your gift will be doubled. And special thanks to all the listeners who, or the viewers who got together and put this match together. That's Roberta in Arizona, Rocky and Julie in Michigan, Beth in North Carolina, Joe and Heidi in Colorado, Suzanne and Jean in Oregon, Bill and Madeline Medine, in Washington, Azra in Illinois, Deborah in Minnesota, Andrew in California, David and Ellen in New York, Gerhardt and Sonia in Wisconsin, Kevin in Illinois, Judy in Oregon, Terry in Texas, Camilla in North Carolina, Sandy and Stuart in California, and Janet in Illinois. And thank you so much. And when you call Free Speech TV to make your contribution, if you are a person of sufficient means to be able to toss in for a future match, be sure to let the people know on the other end of the line. As I mentioned yesterday, calls that come into Free Speech TV more than 10 minutes after our show starts are credited to our show, and some small part of that comes here to help support us in supplying this program to Free Speech TV, which, for the first, I don't know how many years we were on Free Speech TV, we absorbed all the cost, and now, some of our costs to provide our show to Free Speech TV are being picked up through your contributions, a piece of your contributions by Free Speech TV, which is great. So, you're not just supporting Free Speech TV, you're also helping support our program, which is very much appreciated. The telephone number to call to have your match, to have your donation doubled is 877-378-8669, 877-378-8669. And the premiums, the gifts that Free Speech TV will send you in exchange for making a contribution include a Thom Hartmann University bumper sticker, proud student of Thom Hartmann University. I saw one of these on a car in, there was one on a car in Minneapolis, and there was one on a car in Seattle last week when I was traveling around the country doing the book tour for the hidden history of the war on voting, the Republican war on voting. Also with a $20 gift, you could also choose the car magnet to get the vote out. And, it's kind of a cool car magnet. It doesn't look like what you just saw on the screen. We've got to get an actual graphic of it. The canvas tote bag is $50, and it says "Just effing vote." Just get out, just effing vote. The Thom Hartmann mug is with a $75 gift. And it says "Tag, you're it." With a $240 gift, which can be $20 a month for a year, or $240 up front, we have a virtual meet and greet where we all meet on Zoom or Skype or whatever it is, and have an off-the-record conversation where we can use words that we wouldn't normally use on the air, and I can say things that I might be a little more politic about on the air, and you can too. And we've had some fascinating conversations. I've had some fascinating conversations with some of our viewers on a whole wide range of issues. That's with a $240 gift. With a $300 gift, you get my new book, The Hidden History of the War on Voting, Who Stole Your Vote and How to Get It Back. It's a brand new book. It's just out in the last couple of weeks, and it'll be autographed by the author. It'll have an autographed book plate in it. With a $360 gift, you get an autographed set of the first 3 of the Hidden History books. The 4th one is on Monopoly, and it'll be out this fall. So we'll use it for the fall fund drive. But the first 3 are available right now in bookstores and available to you with a $360 gift, all autographed by me, and that can be $30 a month for a year. And with a $1,000 gift, come here to Portland, and on your own dime. I'm sorry, but I'll buy you lunch, and come on in and hang out with us for the last hour of our show, and be part of our peanut gallery. And, I have met some of the most fascinating people through these meet and greets. It's really great. So those are the premiums. Bottom line, please help Free Speech TV continue providing really good progressive programming, my show and a whole bunch of great other programs, by calling 877-378-8669, 877-378-8669, and call now to credit our show for that. Thank you so much. Coming up in the Science Revolution this week, I explain why biodiversity matters and what happens when we lose biodiversity. Margaret Butler from the Extinction Rebellion is here about the activists fighting against oil trains and what happened to them. Dr. David Reichmuth also joins me on the impact of electric cars and find out why people are adding mushrooms to their coffee. That's the Science Revolution, wherever fine podcasts are available. Welcome back. Thom Hartmann here with you. Just to close the conversation that I started before the break. I run into my own breaks sometimes. It's as I mentioned, the National Security Council's entire epidemic division was shut down by Donald Trump 2 years ago. It's still gone. The Health and Human Services and the division of the Homeland, DHS, Department of Homeland Security, their divisions that deal with epidemic diseases have been shut down by Donald Trump and are still gone. Why? Well, because it's science stuff, and Trump doesn't believe in science, and it's liberal stuff. It's the government doing things. Well, we should just rely on United Healthcare and Bayer Pharmaceuticals to deal with all this stuff. We don't need no stinking government. This is pretty breathtaking. Trump also tried to decimate funding for the U.S. Public Health Service. Congress pushed back on that. So what Trump is doing is refusing to allow them to hire people to replace people who have resigned or who have aged out, who have retired. And there is no clear chain of command for pandemic response in the White House any longer. And the ability to test for this coronavirus, that ability to test exists in 3 of the more than 100 public health labs across the country verified by the CDC. So basically, if somebody shows up with these symptoms, we don't really, at this moment, even have the mechanism to test for it. But the New York Times today sent out the New York Times published a statement by the Centers for Disease Control saying this is coming to the United States and we need to prepare ourselves. James Hamblin wrote a piece for The Atlantic a couple of days ago, February 24th, I guess yesterday, headlined, "You're likely to get the coronavirus." So what do we do? I mean, this is probably going to end up being like the common cold, a virus that just kind of periodically sweeps around the world. And the number one thing, I mean, Louise and I had a long conversation with this, and 2 of our kids, one's a PA and the other's an NP, both of them primary healthcare providers. And, we've had this conversation with our kids as well, who are on the front line. They're the most likely to be exposed to this disease long before Louise and I are. And our consensus, and this is just my opinion, and I'm not a scientist, but I think this is common sense, is you do the same things that you do to try to avoid getting the flu and the common cold. You wash your hands regularly. You don't touch infected surfaces. You try to break the habit of, touching your nose or picking your nose or sticking your fingers in your mouth or even touching your eyes without having first washed your hands, because the virus gets on your hands just like the flu virus does, just like the common cold does. It gets on your hands from touching a contaminated surface, whether it's a doorknob or a button in an elevator or whatever it may be, public place. You wash your hands and try to get out of the habit of touching yourself in the face. But most importantly, get healthy. I mean, that's your best defense against the common cold. It's your best, which is a coronavirus. It's your best defense against the flu. I had the flu 2 weeks ago. I was on vacation with my family, and we were down in Central and South America, and we traveled there through Galveston, and Texas was having a flu epidemic at the time, and all but I think 2 of us got the flu on that trip. And, it lasted a day or 2, and I had a little cough tickle in my throat, and it went away. And then, Sean had it when I got back. Louise got it after we got back. But if you're healthy, you're fine. And that's the bottom line. So, start paying attention to how you're eating and start eating a lot of fruit and vegetables and a lot of diverse stuff and a lot of green things and a lot of things that have a lot of color in them to build up your body and your immune system. Start walking a mile or 2 every single day. Get your body in good shape so that physically you can deal with getting sick. Because the vast majority of people who get this Wuhan virus, just, for them it's like a cold. It's one of the reasons why I suspect that the fatality rate is actually below the 2.3% that China's reporting. Because I'm guessing that probably half these cases are not even diagnosed. Because people just get very mild symptoms. Some people get no symptoms at all, but they can still spread the virus. So let's ramp down the hysteria here. And yeah, if 1, 2, 3% of people are dying from it, that's a problem. Most of the people who are dying from it are people who are very, very young and have not yet developed immunity, or very, very old and are falling apart to begin with. And which is the same thing. I mean, flu kills 35,000 people in the United States every year. Who does it kill? Mostly people who have compromised immune systems, people who are not in good health, people who are elderly. These are going to be the populations that this virus is going to do the most damage to. So if you're in one of those populations, try to get yourself healthy. And then the other thing I would add is, let's all not panic, and let's try to calm our neighbors and friends down not to panic. That said, Louise and I lived in Detroit in the 1970s. It's where our oldest daughter was born, in St. Mary's Hospital in Livonia. We lived in Westland, which is right next to Inkster, which is, suburban Detroit. In fact, we lived right on the border, Inkster Road. And the Arab oil embargo had happened, and Nixon was president, and he had put into place wage and price controls and said you could only buy gasoline if your license plate ended with an odd number on, Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, and an even number every other day, as I recall. And the Teamsters went on strike to protest that. And living in Detroit, all of a sudden, in response to the oil embargo and the Teamsters strike, the supermarkets in Detroit were emptied in about 2 or 3 days, just emptied. So, I'm expecting that and we just heard this yesterday from northern Italy, that in 2 of these towns in Italy now, there's no food in any of the supermarkets. Now, they're going to restock. It's going to come back just like it did in Detroit. This is happening in China as well. But, there's probably nothing wrong with having a couple of weeks worth of, canned beans that you'll use anyway. Stock up on a little extra food, but and toilet paper products and things like that. But, let's not panic and let's not spread panic. Let's just be reasonable about this. Get in good physical health. Take the same care that you take to avoid the common cold and the flu virus. Sean's over here doing her exercises. I mean, I was, this last week, I flew from Los Angeles to San Francisco on a plane that was a connection plane for people coming from Asia into Los Angeles. I flew from San Francisco to Seattle on a plane that was a connecting plane for people coming from Asia into San Francisco. These are international airports. I flew from Seattle back here to Portland out of an airport that has lots of flights coming in from Asia, where they're having this disease, particularly South Korea now. I mean, a lot of the flights from China have been cut down. What did I do? I washed my hands constantly. I was very, very careful not to touch my face. And, and I had some of those little towelettes, the things that you use to disinfect your hands, if you don't have soap. And I would use those to wipe down the arm rests on the airplane where I was sitting. Right? It's just, it's simple stuff. It's the stuff. You don't need to get hysterical or OCD about this. It's probably coming. The CDC said today it's probably coming, but let's be reasonable. Okay? Let's take a deep breath. Okay. Let's get to our phone calls here. Paul in Ellsbury, Missouri. Hey, Paul, what's on your mind today?
Good. I really like your show. I'll be calling it pertaining about Bernie Sanders and why he never brings up, like whenever they keep on telling him he's a socialist and we shouldn't have that.
Right.
He never brings up that, Franklin Roosevelt was called the greatest president of the modern times, and he had so many social plans, during the Great Depression and World War II, and they loved him, and he was a great president afterward.
Well, the Republicans didn't love him. They called him a socialist and a communist.
Right, yeah, but most people, regular people, they loved him because he helped bring people to work and stuff like that. They got Social Security, even though a lot of people didn't want that.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I'm with you, Paul. Thank you very much for the call. And this word socialist has got a whole bunch of people freaked out. I mean, Malcolm Nance was tweeting this earlier today. The clip from Bernie at the town hall last night on CNN, which I didn't see, but I did watch the clip that Malcolm tweeted out. And Bernie was essentially saying the same thing he said on 60 Minutes. And lest we forget, and I don't know, Nate, Joyce, if you guys can bring up that clip of President Obama. President Obama said the exact same thing that Bernie said. President Obama opened the United States to Cuba. He reached out to Cuba. He tried to bring us all together. I mean, it was just very, very straightforward stuff. Here, keep in mind, Bernie on 60 Minutes, and everybody is hysterical about this. Bernie on 60 Minutes said, he's a dictator, but he did give everybody health care and education. Now, we're not dictators. We should be able to do the same, right? And we're better than that. Here's what Obama said. I hope.
And I said this to President Castro in Cuba. I said, look, you've made great progress in educating young people. Every child in Cuba gets a basic education. That's a huge improvement from where it was. Medical care. The life expectancy of Cubans is equivalent to the United States, despite it being a very poor country, because they have access to health care. That's a huge achievement.
So that's President Obama saying the exact same thing Bernie Sanders said, and you've got all these Obama supporters like Malcolm Nance going, "Oh my God, Bernie said something nice about Castro." Excuse me, I shouldn't do that with my voice, but come on, this is just crazy. We're better than that. I mean, I was watching MSNBC last night. Chris Hayes' show, and he played the clip of Bernie, and he got somebody on to say, "Oh my God, and I'm yelling at the TV, going, "Well, where's the Obama clip? Obama said the same thing. It was published in the Atlantic yesterday. It's not like the news media doesn't know this. It's all over Twitter. Seriously? Anyhow, we'll be right back. It's 46 minutes past the hour.
You're listening to Thom Hartmann. Visit ThomHartmann.com for audio and video archives.
Picking up your phone calls right after the break. It's 46 minutes here on the Thom Hartmann Program. Speaking the truth, some multinational corporations would really rather you didn't know all about. And welcome back. Roy in Bainbridge Island, Washington. Hey, Roy, what's on your mind today?
Hello. Can you hear me, Tom?
Just fine, Roy.
Tom,
I can hear you, Roy, and let me please ask people in the future not to say, "Can you hear me?" Because if I can't hear you, I'll tell you. Otherwise, just assume I can hear you.
Because I had you on call. Anyway, it's my 90th birthday, and I have already voted
birthday,
in our
Roy.
primary. Thank you. I had already voted in my primary for Bernie Sanders, and I'm thinking of even joining up with the people. But I've listened to you for a long time, and it's my first call, and I just wanted you to know that people out there, that all old white guys are not conservatives.
There you go. Well, if you're 90 years old today, Roy, you must have been born in 1930. Is that right?
I was born February 25, 1930, right?
There you go.
3 years. When I was 3 years and a month old, Roosevelt took office.
Yeah, you were born the same year my mother was, and my dad was born in 32. And so you grew up with Franklin Roosevelt as president while you were a child and a teenager, and then Harry Truman as well, and then Dwight Eisenhower. How did America? Do you recall the Republicans scream? Father Coughlin was doing this on the radio almost every day, screaming about how FDR was a socialist. And do you recall how, generally speaking, Americans thought of FDR?
Oh yes. The conservatives that my parents knew and that I knew talked about that man in the White House. And
yeah, my dad hated him. I mean, because he thought he was a communist. Louisa's grandmother would not speak his name. Like she said, that man in the White House. She would not speak his name. She hated him. The Republican. There was a serious Roosevelt hatred on the Republican side. Makes Bernie hatred look pale.
I also liked Eleanor. I was just growing up. I mean, it was anyway. My father came from England. He was hired by Ford Motor Company from Leeds University. He was in World War I in the cavalry, the English cavalry, and wounded and all that. But he came to Ford to help them tool up to make a V8 engine.
Wow.
And they fired him in 29 because I was on the way. My mother was pregnant, and he had a Liberty Roadster up until that time. But when he wanted to get a sensible car, and being a mechanical engineer as well as a tool design maker, he ended up buying a 29 Chevrolet, and got fired, and then went to Turnsted's. Was there forever after that till he died in '64 because he was a chain smoker from World War I.
Yeah, my dad too. My dad when he was in World War II. I mean, he joined during the war, but by the time he got out of basic training, the war had ended. So they sent him to Japan, where he was part of the occupation. But they gave every GI a pack of cigarettes, a carton of cigarettes every week. And my dad got addicted there, and that helped kill him. Yeah, it was Lucky Strikes, actually. That's what he smoked all his life. And he ended up with mesothelioma, and he also had kidney cancer, and he also had diabetes, and he also had cardiovascular disease. And I think all of those things came out of that smoking. Roy, I'm sorry I'm out of time, but it's great talking with you. Happy 90th birthday, and thanks so much for the call, and thanks for listening to us on KBCS there in Bainbridge Island. It's great to hear from you. We will be right back. It's 10 minutes before the hour. Stick around. Hey, did you know that Hillary Clinton actually won Pennsylvania, Wisconsin, North Carolina, and Florida in the 2016 election? It's on page 92 of my new book, The Hidden History of the War on Voting. By the way, just a heads up, if you're in the Portland area, Friday night I will be signing books. Actually, I'm going to give a talk, about a hour-long talk on the hidden history of the war on voting and who stole your vote and how to get it back, the Republican war on voting. And I'm going to get into some details that that go way beyond what I generally talk about on the air. And then Sunday in Chicago, in the Darien suburb of Chicago, I'll be at the Frugal Muse bookstore. In both cases, you don't need to register. There's no admission. It's completely free. Just show up, and if you want to get an autographed book and you want to hear my talk, I'll be giving a talk in both places. That's Friday night at 7:30 at Powell's here in Portland, and Sunday at noon in Darien. I believe it's Sunday. It is, right, Sean? Yeah, Sunday at noon in Darien at Frugal Muse Bookstore in the Chicago area. Norma in Montgomery, Alabama. Hey, Norma. Thanks for watching Free Speech TV. What's up?
Well, I wanted to back you up on not panicking about this coronavirus. Most people don't realize that we've already had 16,000 people die from the flu this year, and nobody's screaming about it,
right.
Of which 157 were children. But if you do have someone in your home that is susceptible to anything that's going around, like when we have pink eye in the school, everybody wipes their grocery cart with a rag, with one of those cleaner rags. They pick up the baskets and wipe it so that you don't take pink eye home.
Right.
This is common sense, practical stuff. But if you have someone that you don't want going out in the public, then go ahead and prepare them some meals so that they can stack them in the freezer. And that way, if they're afraid to go out, they will have prepared cooked food in the freezer. And if you don't have one, you can buy one of the little, special order one that's the size of a dorm room refrigerator. That thing is very expensive. But you can order a 2x2, 5-foot-tall one for about $300 from one of the big box stores. It's full of shelves, so there's no way a child can get in it. And you can stack pre-made dinners for your person who is susceptible to stuff like this so they don't have to leave home.
Right.
And that way you can isolate them until whatever goes through your community is moved on.
Right.
And put them on a higher dose of vitamin C. This is what we were talking about at the health food store. And
that's the one thing that I would stock up on. And in fact, Louise and I just bought, Amazon now sells vitamin C in 300, 1 gram, 1,000 milligram vitamin C in a 300 tablet bottle. And we bought 2 or 3 of them. So we've got a year's supply of vitamin C.
You need a bottle for every family member.
Yeah, you should take a gram of it every 4 or 5 hours because it flushes out of your system after 4 or 5 hours. So.
Yeah, and get a high level of vitamin D. Your body needs this.
Yep. Simple stuff. And and the other thing I was doing when I was on the road and I was doing book signings, people would stick out their hand. They wanted me to shake hands, and I would just say,
that's what I'm about to say is don't shake hands. Don't even do a fist bump. That way you don't take it home.
Yeah.
Buy a bottle of alcohol and some paper towels and wipe stuff down. A lot of these little bottles of hand sanitizer does not contain a high enough level of alcohol. So pay attention to what you buy. And if you can't find your hand sanitizer, remember that a lot of the mouthwashes contain high levels of alcohol.
There you go. Yeah.
It's a disinfectant.
Yeah, which is why the winos will drink them. Norma, thank you for the call. It's nice to hear from you. Mike in Detroit. Hey, Mike, thanks for listening to Sirius XM. You want to disagree with me?
Well, just a little bit. No, maybe I don't have, because I think you might have touched on it with that libertarian friend you got about police and fire. They're not really social programs, so to speak. You can't really clump it in because that's mostly local taxes.
But it's still tax dollars. It's still, it's a socialist program because it's government funded and it's providing a public good.
Well, but you can't really lump it in with federal program because, you got your volunteers.
Well, actually, there are huge federal subsidies to both police and fire departments. But you're right. The majority of their budgets are local, but that doesn't make it any less socialist. It's just local socialism.
Right. It's somewhat in the same category, but not in the. All right, but now let me ask you real quick. That fellow you had on your regular guest, congressman from Minnesota or Wisconsin.
Right, Mark Pocan from Wisconsin.
Okay, I called before. Remember about the the Congress people that use taxpayer money to pay off the sexual harassment
suits? Yeah.
And he knew nothing about it.
Right.
Now, I was just wondering, Elizabeth Warren attacked Bloomberg about that. Would she be willing to come out in one of these debates? Could they get the question to her? Would she be willing to ask for congressional openness about that?
I would be astonished if she wasn't. It just seems like a common sense position. I don't think anybody thinks that members of Congress should have federal funds in taxpayer dollars paying off people that they've victimized in order to keep them quiet. I just think that's totally wrong, and I'm not sure it's still happening. I think that
I don't think it is. Probably not. We should know about it.
Yeah, it's largely. I think they largely put an end to it. Mike, I'm sorry, we're out of time. It's the end of the hour here, but we will continue our program and continue our calls and continue our conversations. I want to get into how much socialism does it take to build a middle class. After the break here at the top of the hour. And, we'll continue with our show. So stick around. We'll be right back.
You're listening to Thom Hartmann.
We have a special video up over at ThomHartmann.com for supporters of our program, and it's about how a letter that the IRS sent out to 3.9 million Americans saved 700 lives. And you're like, wait a minute, the IRS saved 700 lives? How did that happen? Well, it had to do with Obamacare, and it's a fascinating story. And it turns out that this analysis of this IRS mailing was actually the first time that the federal government has done a study that actually proved that people having access to health care produces fewer deaths. For every 1,648 people who got the letter, there was one fewer premature death. I'll explain the whole thing in the video. It's you know, as I said, it's available over at ThomHartmann.com for people who are regular supporters of our program, and it is really worth checking out. And it's a great ad, essentially, for a national health care system. Well, happy Tuesday. It's the second day of the Free Speech TV fundraising drive. The Free Speech TV television network, if you happen to be watching us on YouTube or Facebook or Twitter Live, Free Speech TV is available on Dish and direct satellite systems. If you have those systems, you can find it right on your TV set. And they're also on the internet at freespeech.org, so check it out. But speaking to those of you who are watching us on Free Speech TV, this is how these fund drives. Free Speech TV is a nonprofit organization. They don't take money from big corporations, and this is how we fund this television network. And it's a substantial television network with millions of viewers all across the country. It's in tens of millions, I believe over 60 million homes, and then, of course, available on the internet worldwide. And it always amazes me how many people watch this program on Free Speech TV. So, cool news for today. Today we have a $25,000 match. So your gift up to $25,000 will be doubled. Whether it's $5, $10, $50, $100, $1,000, $5,000, $25,000, your gift will be doubled. And special thanks to all the listeners who, or the viewers who got together and put this match together. That's Roberta in Arizona, Rocky and Julie in Michigan, Beth in North Carolina, Joe and Heidi in Colorado, Suzanne and Jean in Oregon, Bill and Madeline Medine, in Washington, Azra in Illinois, Deborah in Minnesota, Andrew in California, David and Ellen in New York, Gerhardt and Sonia in Wisconsin, Kevin in Illinois, Judy in Oregon, Terry in Texas, Camilla in North Carolina, Sandy and Stuart in California, and Janet in Illinois. And thank you so much. And when you call Free Speech TV to make your contribution, if you are a person of sufficient means to be able to toss in for a future match, be sure to let the people know on the other end of the line. As I mentioned yesterday, calls that come into Free Speech TV more than 10 minutes after our show starts are credited to our show, and some small part of that comes here to help support us in supplying this program to Free Speech TV, which, you know, for the first, I don't know how many years we were on Free Speech TV, we absorbed all the cost, and now, you know, some of our costs to provide our show to Free Speech TV are being picked up through your contributions, a piece of your contributions by Free Speech TV, which is great. So, you know, you're not just supporting Free Speech TV, you're also helping support our program, which is very much appreciated. The telephone number to call to have your match, to have your donation doubled is 877-378-8669, 877-378-8669. And the premiums, the gifts that Free Speech TV will send you in exchange for making a contribution include a Thom Hartmann University bumper sticker, proud student of Thom Hartmann University. I saw one of these on a car in, well, there was one on a car in Minneapolis, and there was one on a car in Seattle last week when I was traveling around the country doing the book tour for the hidden history of the war on voting, the Republican war on voting. Also with a $20 gift, you could also choose the car magnet to get the vote out. And, you know, it's kind of a cool car magnet. It doesn't look like what you just saw on the screen. We've got to get an actual graphic of it. The canvas tote bag is $50, and it says "Just effing vote." Just get out, just effing vote. The Thom Hartmann mug is with a $75 gift. That's and it says "Tag, you're it." With a $240 gift, which can be $20 a month for a year, or $240 up front. We have a virtual meet and greet where we all meet on Zoom or Skype or whatever it is, and have an off-the-record conversation where we can use words that we wouldn't normally use on the air, and I can say things that I might be a little more politic about on the air, and you can too. And we've had some fascinating conversations. I've had some fascinating conversations with some of our viewers on a whole wide range of issues. That's with a $240 gift. With a $300 gift, you get my new book, The Hidden History of the War on Voting, Who Stole Your Vote and How to Get It Back. It's a brand new book. It's just out in the last couple of weeks, and it'll be autographed by the author. It'll have an autographed book plate in it. With a $360 gift, you get an autographed set of the first 3 of the Hidden History books. The 4th one is on Monopoly, and it'll be out this fall. So we'll use it for the fall fund drive. But the first 3 are available right now in bookstores and available to you with a $360 gift, all autographed by me, and that can be $30 a month for a year. And with a $1,000 gift, come here to Portland, and on your own dime. I'm sorry, but I'll buy you lunch, and come on in and hang out with us for the last hour of our show, and be part of our peanut gallery. And I have met some of the most fascinating people through these meet and greets. It's really great. So those are the premiums. Bottom line, please help Free Speech TV continue providing really good progressive programming, my show and a whole bunch of great other programs, by calling 877-378-8669, 877-378-8669, and call now to credit our show for that. Thank you so much.
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
Welcome back. Thom Hartmann here with you. A couple of news stories that I think are worthy of note, and then I want to talk a little bit about how do you build an economy that actually has a middle class in it. We used to know this before Reagan came along. He turned normal Keynesian economics, classical economics, on its head with this, what his running mate referred to as voodoo economics. What David Stockman, his Office of Management and Budget Director, later wrote an entire book apologizing for, which was basically this libertarian economic theory that has gutted the American middle class. We'll get into that in just a minute. I did want to note that this remarkable new report, it was published in The Guardian by Oliver Millman, but it's astonishing. They're looking at Twitter all around the world, and on an average day during the period studied in this particular analysis, this was done at Brown University. PhD candidate Thomas Marlowe supervised the research. What they found was that on the average day during the period studied, 25% of all tweets about the climate crisis came from bots. They were responsible for 38% of all tweets about fake science, 28% of all tweets about ExxonMobil. And all of these tweets that are coming from bots are saying there's no such thing as a climate crisis, it's overstated, don't worry. I don't know if you saw the story that the Heartland Institute, which is a right-wing think tank funded by right-wing billionaires and fossil fuel companies, has found a nice, young, blonde, attractive teenage girl to be the anti-Greta Thunberg. This new, I mean, this is just so sad, right? They've got this young woman, and they're putting her out there. And this is a phony science organization, and they also promote creationism. That is funded by right-wing cranks and by the fossil fuel industry, directly and indirectly, or indirectly. And they've got this teenage girl out there saying, "Oh, you know, it's all overstated, and there's no way that the CO2 we're throwing into the atmosphere is having that dramatic an effect. And really, what's going on is that the solar radiation from the sun is going down and has been since the 1970s, and that's causing our weird weather." Well, in fact, solar radiation does change. You know, goes up and down in predictable cycles and all that kind of stuff. And it does have a small effect on our weather. And in fact, it probably accounts for the little ice age in Northern Europe. But that was not, it may not too, because that was not a worldwide phenomenon. Nobody's to this day really sure. But it's just so sad that they would do this. And infuriating, frankly. And then we find that a quarter of all the tweets about the climate, which is probably the majority of the tweets denying climate change, are coming from bots. And I'm telling you, these bots, you know, it's not that expensive to buy bots now. You know, I mentioned last week our show was being inundated with phony Bloomberg people. And, you know, Bloomberg's a Democrat. And if he's our nominee, I'll vote for him and support him. And I've said that on the air. But we were getting all these first-time callers who just wanted to go on and talk about Bloomberg. Why? Well, he's paying $2,500 a month for, you know, to people if they'll promote him on social media. And so, you know, yeah, I'm seeing that showing up on my Twitter feed now. I'm not so much on Instagram. We probably should get there. We see it on our Facebook feed. We certainly saw it for a while. As Nigel, my webmaster, pointed out, it looked like they were using the same artificial intelligence programs that the porn bots use to spam chat rooms. And they were spamming our chat room over on YouTube because, you know, this show is simulcast live on YouTube. And there's a chat room associated with that and being in there and, you know, all this kind of stuff. But Bloomberg did, to his credit, I suppose, just delete a whole bunch of fake quotes that he had tweeted out. Fake Bernie Sanders quotes, making it sound like Bernie Sanders loved Fidel Castro. And Bloomberg's campaign, this is from a piece that was published on Common Dreams today. Raw Story picked it up. You can find it in either place. Mike Bloomberg has been publishing videos attacking Bernie Sanders and Bernie supporters for being toxic, and then Bloomberg fabricated grotesque fake quotes and attributed them to Bernie. That's the bottom line story. And it's remarkable. Sanders' press secretary, Brianna Joy Gray, called the tweets a string of intentional outright lies. She said, "I'm old enough to remember a full news cycle on an honest mistake I made and immediately corrected. I expect to see a similar level of outrage about this string of intentional outright lies from the Bloomberg camp." David Sirota has been tweeting about this as well, you know, saying Mike Bloomberg has been publishing videos attacking Bernie and Bernie Sanders for being toxic. I find this all very sad, you know, that this billionaire thinks that he can just buy his way into it, and that by paying people to say nice things about him, somehow that's going to ignite a movement that is going to be so strong and so powerful that it can take down Donald Trump. Donald Trump actually has a movement behind him. He's got a whole bunch of you know, young men, white young men, the incels, probably most of them out there, who just believe that he's going to be their salvation. He's going to put women back in their place. And he's going to put minorities back in their place, and he's going to somehow make prosperity happen to young white people who are not born with a lot of money. I mean, you know, it's a fantasy, and a bizarre and sick fantasy, at least with regard to the position of women and minorities. But, you know, they're out there. He's got a base. He actually has a base, an active base. Bernie Sanders has a base. Elizabeth Warren has a base. Amy Klobuchar has a base. Basically, Pete Buttigieg has a base. You know, every single one of these people have a large number of people who really like them and will go to the mattress for them, will phone bank for them, will campaign for them, will volunteer for them, will go door to door for them. And you know, there's probably some New Yorkers who remember Bloomberg's mayorship favorably who kind of like Mayor Bloomberg, but I don't think that you could describe them as a base. I mean, Mike Bloomberg's base is $81 billion. So we'll see what happens tonight in the debate, but both Bloomberg and Steyer, I wish that instead of trying these vanity runs for president, they would either commit their money to supporting the Democratic nominee, whoever that may be, and taking down Donald Trump. And Bloomberg has said he'll do this, to his credit, and Steyer has suggested or implied that he would do this. But frankly, I mean, I wrote this op-ed to Tom Steyer, kind of an open letter to Tom Steyer back maybe 6-8 months ago when he first was on the scene. And at that time, iHeartRadio, which, carries this show in some markets, we're in San Francisco, we're on an iHeart radio station. And, it's a great company, and they own a lot of radio stations. They own hundreds and hundreds of radio stations all over the country. And in almost every city in America, you can find an iHeart radio station that carries right-wing talk radio. And a couple of them carry my show, carry progressive programming, like in San Francisco, and I believe in Albuquerque, New Mexico. So, and God bless them, right? But the network, because Mitt Romney acquired what it was called Clear Channel, Mitt Romney's Vulture Capital firm bought it, took progressive programming off the 54 stations we were on most of them, and then Romney ran for president, of course, and then he stripped it. This is what Vulture Capital companies do, is they just strip companies bare. And the consequence, and then they leave them with an enormous amount of debt, and then the company has to pay back the debt, and Romney and his friends walked away with all the money. And so after that happened, iHeartMedia went bankrupt. And they were for sale. They were for sale last year for $1.1 billion, as I recall. And so I wrote this open op-ed to Tom Steyer saying, you want to have an impact? Buy iHeartMedia. Or, Cumulus went through bankruptcy, too. This is the exact same thing. Bought by a Vulture Capital company. It was originally CBS Radio, and then it became Cumulus, and it was bought by the Dickey brothers, and then it went through a Vulture Capital thing, and then they went bankrupt. And they were for sale. Why don't these guys, look at what Rupert Murdoch has done. Buy some friggin' media, right? You look at some of our big for-profit stations, KTNF in Minneapolis, where I was last weekend, WCPT in Chicago, where I will be next weekend. We've got some substantial, KTRC in Santa Fe, great station. These are independent stations that are locally owned by good people. We need more of this. We need more progressive media out there. So, maybe if you know any of these billionaires, whisper in their ear, okay?
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
And I never got around to how to build a middle class, so I'll talk about that right after the break, and we'll pick up your phone calls and onward through the fog, right? As Oat Willie used to say. Stick around. And welcome back. Steve in Topanga, California. Hey, Steve, thanks for watching us on Free Speech TV. What's on your mind today?
Hey, Tom. Good to talk to you again. My slogan today is education is the savior of the nation. Okay. And I really think that people need to get their own education by reading books. And I'm reading The Crisis of Conscience, Whistleblowing in an Age of Fraud by Tom Mueller. Very educated. It just goes across the board on all these industries that are just actually stealing from the American public. And I like the Farewell Tour by Chris Hedges. Mm-hmm. Promote your book that I just read, the Hidden History of the Supreme Court, The Betrayal of America. That was also good.
Thank you.
And, the guy you had on talking about Bernie's Cuba thing, well, I was in Cuba a couple of years ago. I spent 10 days there, and I loved it. It was great. I didn't see any homeless people.
No, it's they outlawed homelessness. So, if somebody's homeless, the government has to provide them with a home, period, full stop. It's just that simple.
And when I was in Australia, I saw one homeless person sleeping in a storefront the whole time I was there. I was only there. A lot of the problem, I think, is that Americans don't get out and see things for themselves. I mean, there's very few people that have passports. The percentage is very low.
Yeah, it's about 5% of Americans, I believe, have passports, and about 2.5% of Americans have traveled outside of North America.
Exactly, and that's what I'm saying. When you get out and see things for yourself, you attain your critical thinking, and you get past people's opinions. And sport, socialism, we're socialized all over the place. Like you say, police, fire, libraries, schools. I grew up in the 60s, and I had a pretty good, public education.
Me too.
And the last thing I want to say
that was that socialist Dwight Eisenhower. He was the one, particularly after Sputnik went up in '57. He was the one. Dwight Eisenhower was the one who poured federal money into primary education all across the United States.
And listening to you, I didn't realize, because I was a little bit too young at the time. But Eisenhower, I didn't realize how beneficial his presidency was. And that's what I'm. Your show is so good on educating people on the real facts, and I love that. When after the revolution in Cuba, Castro went to the United Nations in New York. He couldn't get a hotel room. He had to go to Harlem to get a hotel room.
Right.
And
And by the way, he had reached out. This was, the revolution was in '59, and Nixon was vice president, and Eisenhower had a heart attack in 1959, and Nixon was largely running the White House. And Castro reached out to Nixon. He reached out to the Eisenhower administration and said, I would like to align myself with the United States. We're going to be socialist, but we would like to align ourselves with the United States. And Nixon turned him down. And that's when he turned to the Soviet Union.
He had no choice. And you look at Iran now, people don't realize that we overthrew the democratically elected president of Iran, Mossadegh.
Yep.
And if you go, and then you talked about Cuba and Allende and the Chicago School of Economics,
right.
And Milton Friedman, and Reagan, was influenced by Milton Friedman.
Yep.
And it's just you need to know history, and that's how you get you get educated.
Yeah, I'm with you. And a lot of this stuff that you're talking about here, Steve, is in my next book, The Hidden History of Monopoly and the Destruction of the American Middle Class, and which is available for pre-order right now on fine book sites.
I'm going to do the voting book first.
Okay, you do it. Steve, thanks for the call. We'll be right back. Our 1-hour free podcast recaps our show, and it's available wherever fine podcasts are found. And we have the full 3-hour podcast available over at thomhartmann.com if you want to really support our program. So over at thomhartmann.com, we have a special video up over at thomhartmann.com for supporters of our program, and it's about how a letter that the IRS sent out to 3.9 million Americans saved 700 lives. And you're like, wait a minute, the IRS saved 700 lives? How did that happen? Well, it had to do with Obamacare, and it's a fascinating story. And it turns out that this analysis of this IRS mailing was actually the first time that the federal government has done a study that actually proved that people having access to health care produces fewer deaths. For every 1,648 people who got the letter, there was one fewer premature death. I'll explain the whole thing in the video. It's as I said, it's available over at thomhartmann.com for people who are regular supporters of our program, and it is really worth checking out. And it's a great ad, essentially, for a national health care system. So how do you build a middle class? I mean, this is ultimately the question. This was my debate with Charles Sauer an hour ago, the libertarian economist. Basically, he's saying that if you want to have a middle class, because he was, at the very end, I said, what do you think about Bernie? And he said, Bernie, I like Bernie. Bernie tells the truth. And, I disagree with how he wants to get to where he wants to go. But we both want everybody in this country to have health care. And we both want all of our kids to get a good education. And we both want, and I know that to be true of Charles, by the way, because I know Charles. I got to know Charles quite well when we lived in D.C. And he's one of a small handful of conservatives that I consider friends. Julio Rivera is another one who comes on this show and defends Donald Trump. But Julio is a good and decent guy, even though he's a little nutty when it comes to politics. But, the question is, how do you build a strong middle class? And if we look at history, what we find is that whenever we've slid into laissez-faire capitalism, unregulated capitalism, raw, naked, brutal capitalism, whenever we slide into that, as we did in the period from the 1880s until 1900, and as we did in the period from 1920 to 1930, and as we did in the period from 1980 to today, whenever we slide into laissez-faire capitalism, what we end up with is a reduction in the middle class, a kneecapping of the middle class, a stealing of the wealth of the middle class and working people below the middle class, and a transfer of that wealth to the very top, typically the top 1%, certainly the top 5%. And it's as predictable as, the sun comes up every morning. And you can look all over the world, and what you see is that when you have regulated capitalism, heavily regulated capitalism, where people cannot exploit other people, where it's harder to exploit workers, where it's harder to exploit customers, where there's actual competition. And competition is the consequence of the rules of the game of capitalism being defined in a way that promotes competition. Competition is a good thing. But we're now to the point where we have the highest airline prices in the world because we're down to basically 4 major airlines. We have the highest cell phone service prices in the world. The average family in the United States spends around between $80 and $100 a month for cell phone service for the family. In France, you can get cell phone service for $5 a month. Why? Because there's 100 different companies offering cell phone service. Here in the United States, internet service, the average cost of internet service in the United States is in the $70 range. But in France, and by the way, that's for slow internet service. That's like, for 10 MIPS down and 1 MIP up, or maybe 50 MIPS down and 5 or 10 MIPS up. For 100 MIPS in both directions in France, you can get internet service for $15, $20. And it's not just France, by the way. It's all, it's South Korea, it's Japan, it's all the rest of the European countries. I just use France as an example because there have been several good pieces written about this, and Thomas Piketty, who is a French economist, has been writing about this a lot lately. We don't have competition in the United States anymore. We have monopoly. That's why, as I mentioned earlier, my next book, which will be out this fall, and it's available for pre-order right now, shameless plug, is the hidden history of monopoly and the destruction of the American middle class and small business. And that's exactly what's going on. So if we want to have a strong middle class, we need to, number one, challenge the monopolies. We need to take them on and take them down. Number two, we need to build the power of labor through encouraging unionization. And number three, we need to discourage hoarding of wealth and the theft of wealth through a high tax rate on really genuinely wealthy people, which includes, in my opinion, that a property tax like you and I pay on our homes, a wealth tax, should be paid by the billionaires on the money in their money bin. Which is, and all of these things, by the way, are things that uniquely Elizabeth Warren and Bernie Sanders are proposing on the campaign trail. And it's why I'm so pleased that we have, this is the first time since 1992 that we've had a real progressive running for president. In 92, I think Teddy Kennedy tried to take on Bill Clinton. I could be wrong back in 92. But I'm pretty sure there was a real progressive in that primary. But, we haven't seen a good, solid progressive since then on the Democratic side. And we've got 2 of them now, and I'm just delighted. And these are people who will build movements and who do have history behind them. Not just a personal history and a personal record, but, the history of the United States that shows that when we move toward regulated capitalism, we have better outcomes.
You're listening to the Thom Hartmann Program. Call 202-808-9925.
So strengthening our social safety nets, strengthening labor, and strengthening competition. These are all things only government can do. We'll be back. Well, happy Tuesday. It's the second day of the Free Speech TV fundraising drive. The Free Speech TV television network, if you happen to be watching us on YouTube or Facebook or Twitter Live, Free Speech TV is available on Dish and direct satellite systems. If you have those systems, you can find it right on your TV set. And they're also on the internet at freespeech.org, so check it out. But speaking to those of you who are watching us on Free Speech TV, this is how these fund drives, Free Speech TV is a nonprofit organization. They don't take money from big corporations, and this is how we fund this television network. And it's a substantial television network with millions of viewers all across the country. It's in tens of millions, I believe over 60 million homes, and then, of course, available on the internet worldwide. And it always amazes me how many people watch this program on Free Speech TV. So, cool news for today. Today we have a $25,000 match. So your gift up to $25,000 will be doubled. Whether it's $5, $10, $50, $100, $1,000, $5,000, $25,000, your gift will be doubled. And special thanks to all the listeners who, or the viewers who got together and put this match together. That's Roberta in Arizona, Rocky and Julie in Michigan, Beth in North Carolina, Joe and Heidi in Colorado, Suzanne and Jean in Oregon, Bill and Madeline, Medine, in Washington, Azra in Illinois, Deborah in Minnesota, Andrew in California, David and Ellen in New York, Gerhardt and Sonia in Wisconsin, Kevin in Illinois, Judy in Oregon, Terry in Texas, Camilla in North Carolina, Sandy and Stuart in California, and Janet in Illinois. And thank you so much. And when you call Free Speech TV to make your contribution, if you are a person of sufficient means to be able to toss in for a future match, be sure to let the people know on the other end of the line. As I mentioned yesterday, calls that come into Free Speech TV more than 10 minutes after our show starts are credited to our show, and some small part of that comes here to help support us in supplying this program to Free Speech TV, which, you know, for the first, I don't know how many years we were on Free Speech TV, we absorbed all the cost, and now, you know, some of our costs to provide our show to Free Speech TV are being picked up through your contributions, a piece of your contributions by Free Speech TV, which is great. So, you know, you're not just supporting Free Speech TV, you're also helping support our program, which is very much appreciated. The telephone number to call to have your match, to have your donation doubled is 877-378-8669, 877-378-8669. And the premiums, the gifts that Free Speech TV will send you in exchange for making a contribution include a Thom Hartmann University bumper sticker, proud student of Thom Hartmann University. I saw one of these on a car in, well, there was one on a car in Minneapolis and there's one on a car in Seattle last week when I was traveling around the country doing the book tour for the hidden history of the war on voting, the Republican war on voting. Also with a $20 gift, you could also choose the car magnet to get the vote out. And, you know, it's kind of a cool car magnet. It doesn't look like what you just saw on the screen. We've got to get an actual graphic of it. The canvas tote bag is $50, and it says "Just effing vote." Just get out, just effing vote. The Thom Hartmann mug is with a $75 gift. That's and it says "Tag You're It." With a $240 gift, which can be $20 a month for a year, or $240 up front. We have a virtual meet and greet where we all meet on Zoom or Skype or whatever it is, and you know, have an off-the-record conversation where we can use words that we wouldn't normally use on the air, and I can say things that I might be a little more politic about on the air, and you can too. And we've had some fascinating conversations. I've had some fascinating conversations with some of our viewers on a whole wide range of issues. That's with a $240 gift. With a $300 gift, you get my new book, The Hidden History of the War on Voting, Who Stole Your Vote and How to Get It Back. It's a brand new book. It's just out in the last couple of weeks, and it'll be, you know, autographed by the author. It'll have an autographed book plate in it. With a $360 gift, you get an autographed set of the first 3 of the Hidden History books. The 4th one is on Monopoly, and it'll be out this fall. So we'll use it for the fall fund drive. But the first 3 are available right now in bookstores and available to you with a $360 gift, all autographed by me, and that can be $30 a month for a year. And with a $1,000 gift, come here to Portland, and you know, on your own dime. I'm sorry, but I'll buy you lunch, and come on in and hang out with us for the last hour of our show, and you know, be part of our peanut gallery. And, I have met some of the most fascinating people through these meet and greets. It's really great. So those are the premiums. Bottom line, please help Free Speech TV continue providing really good progressive programming, my show and a whole bunch of great other programs, by calling 877-378-8669, 877-378-8669, and call now to credit our show for that. Thank you so much. Coming up in the Science Revolution this week, I explain why biodiversity matters and what happens when we lose biodiversity. Margaret Butler from the Extinction Rebellion is here about the activists fighting against oil trains and what happened to them. Dr. David Reichmuth also joins me on the impact of electric cars and find out why people are adding mushrooms to their coffee. That's the Science Revolution, wherever fine podcasts are available. Welcome back. Thom Hartmann here with you. So I found the actual tweets that Team Bloomberg had put out that were phony Bernie quotes. And, it's pretty amazing. Kim Jong-un, for starving millions of his own people, despite, but the good thing he did was he opened a water park with over 10 slides, a lazy river, and a wave machine. What a blast. And then the hashtag was Bernie on despots. I'm guessing, since these are all literally made-up quotes, that they thought that they were being sarcastic, sort of the way Adam Schiff, misquoted Donald Trump, in his hearings for which he took so much heat. These tweets have since been deleted, but I'm guessing this is going to come up tonight in the debate. Here's a couple of them. And keep in mind, these are in quotation marks, so these are supposed to be quotes from Bernie Sanders. They're tweeted by Team Bloomberg. Which is at Mike 2020. Look, we all know Bashar al-Assad, that's the dictator of Syria. Look, we all know Bashar al-Assad has committed countless war crimes against his own people, but let's not forget how he introduced paper recycling to reduce municipal waste. So when you think of it, he's really kind of a hero. Right. This is a supposed Bernie quote, right? That Bloomberg made up. Here's another one. Should we really hold Muammar al-Gaddafi's extrajudicial killings of political opponents against him when he also built a pretty sweet countrywide irrigation system? Hashtag Bernie on despots. Here's another one. Again, supposedly quoting Bernie Sanders. Who am I to question Kim Jong-un for starving millions of his own people when he opened a kick-ass water park with over 10 slides, a lazy river, and a wave machine? What a blast. Right. By the way, that could be a Donald Trump tweet. And here's another one, quote, again, this is supposed to be Bernie. It's not. It's a lie. It's made up. Vladimir Putin is willing to poison anyone who disagrees with him, but have you seen how that guy looks without a shirt? Delish. Hashtag Bernie on despots. I mean, this is beyond reprehensible. And yesterday, Bloomberg tweeted a clip of Bernie Sanders on 60 Minutes saying, yes, the Castro regime was and still is a despotic regime. We don't like that. We don't encourage that. But if you're wondering why there wasn't a revolution against Castro in 1960 when he became president, it's because he gave free education to everybody, and the illiteracy was like really, really high in Cuba at the time. And literally people were dying of poverty. And he gave everybody free education, and he gave everybody free health care. And that's absolutely true. And that clip, Bloomberg tweeted that clip out and saying, here's Bernie praising communist Cuba, right? And the headline in the New York Times, and there's one over at TPM, Bernie's going to take some heat from the Cubans in Florida on this one. Right. So here's Barack Obama saying the exact same thing. Here is Barack Obama saying the exact same thing.
I said this to President Castro in Cuba. I said, look, you've made great progress in educating young people. Every child in Cuba gets a basic education. That's a huge improvement from where it was. Medical care. The life expectancy of Cubans is equivalent to the United States, despite it being a very poor country, because they have access to health care. That's a huge achievement. They should be congratulated.
So there you go. They should be congratulated. So President Obama, I guess, is a communist too, right? Come on, guys. And if anybody brings this up tonight, and this, like I said, this clip is all over Twitter. It's all over the internet. The Atlantic did an article about it. It'll be on our Twitter stream today. If this BS issue comes up tonight, and the moderators ask a question about, Bernie talking about Cuba, and they fail to also play this clip of Obama, I'm calling foul in advance, and we all should, and we should all get on Twitter and point it out to them. So anyway, Paul in Woodinville, Washington. Hey, Paul, what's on your mind today?
Yeah, Tom, can I just say first, before I talk about socialism, I think the Democratic candidates ought to just leave Michael Bloomberg alone. Ignore him. Don't respond to him. Don't attack him. Because I'm not so sure that Michael Bloomberg isn't so petulant that if he doesn't get this nomination, he's going to start turning his money against the Democrats. He's already doing it.
Yeah, I agree. So, well, he's doing it against Bernie right now, and Bernie's, the most likely nominee. So, yes, I agree with you. And just giving him totally giving him the cold shoulder and behaving like, who is this guy? What's he doing here? That would be a very effective strategy. Yeah.
Yeah, don't attack him like Elizabeth did. Just act like, let him talk and say his thing. Don't argue with his policy positions. Just ignore him. Just act like he's not there.
Yeah.
But in terms of socialism, Tom, I was listening to your guests, and I thought, well, if European socialism is so bad, and I looked this up real quick, why is their GDP nearly the same as ours?
Right.
I mean,
and in some cases better.
We have significantly more debt, yet they have all of their basics paid for. Mm-hmm. I just looked it up. In 2017, the GDP of the European Union was 17.3 trillion. The GDP of the United States was 19.4. That's 12% greater by the United States. But we have, like I say, we don't have everything taken care of. They do. They have free medical care. And that's really what we're talking about here in terms of the socialism issue.
Yep.
We're talking about whether this is socialized medicine, all these other things that we talk about, whether you want to call it socialized or not. And in fact, I called Bernie's office and I said, you know what Bernie should say is, well, is Medicare socialism? And if it is, if they say yes, and they say, well, that's a socialism that we all like. We don't want to nobody wants to get rid of that. Right. So Medicare for all can't be. If they say no, they say that's not. But here's the other thing about Cuba. I wanted to say this because of your earlier guest. One thing about their literacy, but I was also reading that the infant mortality of the United States is 41% higher than in Cuba.
Yep.
610 in the United States, 610 deaths per 100,000 live births. Cuba is 430.
Yep.
Now, my buddy Lars Larson said, well, just like your guest said, it's the right-wing response. Oh, the communist liars. And I said, well, 430 isn't a very good lie. But even if they're lying, 610 by the United States is still not very good.
Right. Yeah, and you can compare us to any other country. But the fact of the matter is, and this is something that the communists can't lie about because it's easily checked, the major export of Cuba, do you know what the major export of Cuba is?
Sugarcane, right?
Doctors.
Doctors.
They exported 24,000 doctors last year all around the world.
Well, here's the question about the medical care is, and where I was going to go comparing, the infant mortality rate in the United States is the worst, 50th among the 50 westernized nations. And when you start comparing, France is at about 210, Japan is at 203. But you know who's tops on the list, Tom? Our neighbors to the north, Canada, is at 40. 40. So, in other words, maybe the Cubans are lying, but are the Canadians lying? And why are we 15 times worse in infant mortality than our neighbors to the north?
Yeah. Amen. This is where, if you just do even the most shallow deep dive into reality, into the real statistics, what you discover is that Bernie is just continuing the tradition of FDR and LBJ. There's nothing radical about him at all. It's only radical if you think that the entire country should be run by a handful of very, very wealthy corporations, which is basically what we've had since 1980. And go ahead.
Yeah, can I riff real quick on what you were saying about how socialism, so to speak, actually stimulates competition? And if we had a single-payer system, that would be what's called a monopsony, not monopoly. Monopsony is many sellers, one buyer, and the buyer dictates the terms.
Right.
And the way that would create competition is that if Medicare pays, let's say, $1,000 for a procedure, given procedure, and it costs you $990 to do it, you only make $10. The way the competition would work is you make more money when you get more efficient and more effective and at doing that procedure, and that's what you call competition. That's how you make more money.
That's correct. Well said. Paul, thanks for the call. Brent in Columbus, Ohio. Hey, Brent, what's on your mind?
Hey, thanks, Tom. So you spoke with a libertarian economist, which almost sounds oxymoronic to me, but
I get it.
They do exist a little bit,
yes.
I guess. The problem that they have is this saying, I'm not sure to whom it's rightly attributed. I've heard it attributed to all different kinds of people, including Yogi Berra, which I'm pretty sure is not true, is in theory, there's no difference between theory and practice, but in practice there is. Whoever
that does sound like a Yogi Berraism.
Yeah, it does sound like a yogiism, but I would find that hard to believe. But I have heard it before. I've seen it attributed to several different folks. And that is the problem with libertarian economists. Rationalism works, and I understand their theory, and they have real concerns that need to be addressed. But empiricism is the other type of thought, and they absolutely disregard it. There is nowhere in practice that their theory has ever worked. It needs to be incorporated into a socialist or communist, I guess, ideology, but it cannot rule any more than a pure communistic can rule. I mean, you have to have some degree of moderation on both sides, and they just absolutely disregard any sort of actual evidence that would hold up in a scientific experiment.
Right. Yeah, and this is why the ultimate question that I always ask libertarians, and I frequently ask Charles, is please point to one country where your theories work, and they literally can't name one. The closest they can get is Chile, where Pinochet had to kill over 3,800 people that we know about. He probably killed tens of thousands of people, in order to do that. Brent, thanks for the call. It's nice to hear from you. Mitchell in Las Vegas. Hey, Mitchell, what's up?
How are you doing, Tom?
Hey, happy Tuesday.
Hey,
what's on your mind?
I got a two-part thing. First of all, I want you to know that the VA is a wonderful system, and it is socialism.
The Veterans Administration, yes, it is socialized medicine.
Yeah,
it's our only
wonderful.
socialized medicine system in the United States. The government owns the hospitals, and the doctors get a paycheck from the government. That's socialized medicine.
My second point is I have a question.
Yeah.
Is President Trump, can he be found guilty of treason, according to our Attorney General?
In my opinion, he is guilty of treason. He is giving aid and comfort to an enemy. But our Attorney General, Bill Barr, is just fine with that. He's a believer in the unitary executive theory, which says that the president basically can do whatever he wants, which is what Trump literally said. He said, Article 2 says I can do whatever I want. He obviously believes that now, and he's got Ginny Thomas, Clarence Thomas's wife, coming up with an enemies list of people inside his own administration to purge. This is not good.
You're listening to Thom Hartmann. Visit ThomHartmann.com for audio and video archives.
47 minutes past the hour here on the Thom Hartmann Program, helping you win the water cooler wars right here. And welcome back. Joan in Nashville, Tennessee. Hey, Joan, thanks for watching us on Free Speech TV. What's up?
Tom, I was just wondering, are the Democrats trying to elect a president or a saint? Because nobody is perfect.
Yes.
You're going to find fault with somebody unless you store them away somewhere in some cellar and then bring them out when you want to run them for president. It makes no sense.
Yeah.
And it seems like the Democrats are helping the Republicans. I don't know why Steyer and Bloomberg are not using their money to counteract all of the nonsense and lies that the Republicans are putting on the air. We know that the left and the right corporate media are not going to put the kind of information out there that people need to know in order to make informed decisions.
You're right, Joan.
And they need to put it out in a way that's easily digested. You know, the people in D.C. are in their bubbles. They talk to each other. They're not really in contact with everyday, ordinary people. And people out here are desperate, and they're not listening to them. And it seems like they are complicit almost in making sure that Donald Trump stays in office. And wouldn't it be ironic that the first African-American president duly elected might well be the last elected president of the United States? And it's all premised on, in my opinion, racism. Racism built this country. Racism is going to destroy this country from within. And I say that because no other person other than a wealthy white male would be allowed to do what Donald Trump is doing. The wagons have been circled all of this time, giving him the chance to do what he is doing, and the same procedures, laws, and regulations and processes that were used to keep him in office would have kicked President Obama or even Hillary Clinton out of office right away.
Amen.
He's been allowed to do the damage that he is doing.
I agree.
He couldn't do it without the help of the wagons being
I completely agree. And, you know, you look up white privilege in the dictionary and there's Donald Trump's picture. Joan, you live in Nashville, Tennessee. I'm curious your sense of the vibe on the ground in terms of the Democratic primary.
Tom, I don't know. You don't remember this. I don't vote. I voted one time.
I know
and
we had the conversation. I do remember it. Yeah.
Brothers.
I hope you'll reconsider.
And unfortunately, in the 50-some years since that first vote, I have not seen anything that would make me change my mind about voting. All I know is that I'm being gentrified out of my neighborhood. So I don't know anything about the on-the-ground politics because they're not going to benefit me.
Yeah. Okay. Joan, thank you for the call. It's always nice to hear from you. And you know, I guess we can agree to disagree on voting and not voting, but thank you. It's nice to hear from you. We'll be back. It's 10 minutes before the hour here on the Thom Hartmann Program, coming up on 9 minutes any second now. And we'll be back with more of your calls here on your media support group for We the People, the Thom Hartmann Program. Stick around. Hey, did you know that Hillary Clinton actually won Pennsylvania, Wisconsin, North Carolina, and Florida in the 2016 election? It's on page 92 of my new book, The Hidden History of the War on Voting. Welcome back. Thom Hartmann here with you. Charles in Prescott Valley, Arizona. Hey, Charles, thanks for watching us via Sling TV on Free Speech TV. What's up? Charles? Oh, my. Charles has been on hold for a while there, so I'm going to put him back on hold, and Lise can pick you up. Beth in Albuquerque, New Mexico. Hey, Beth, what's on your mind today?
Hi. I just wanted to run this by you and see if it's a useful tool for people understanding our economic system. There are three things necessary for means of production. One is capital, one is raw materials, and one is people, labor. Mm-hmm. And it seems to me that in capitalism, by its very nature, it just elevates money to be the most important part of it, of the process. And socialism would be focused more on people. And I guess maybe you could say that some indigenous economies, so to speak, have the raw materials, the wealth, the health of the environment as their main focus.
Yeah.
What do you think about that as a way of looking at things?
I think it's a great way to look at it. I would add a fourth component, and that's technology. Whether you're making arrowheads out of flint by using another rock to chip it out, or whether you're building baseball bats using a lathe, you have to have some sort of technology to, or a knife to whittle something, or a paintbrush to make some paint. You have to have some sort of technology in order to produce those goods from those raw materials using that human labor. And I think, frankly, Abraham Lincoln was right when he said labor is superior to capital because labor precedes capital. Without labor, capital can do nothing. And Lincoln said that, and he was absolutely right, and I'm still with him on it. Thanks a lot for the call, Beth. That was excellent. Dave in Steilacoin, Washington. Hey, Dave, what's up?
Hey, that's me. How's it going? Yes, in any discussion about what socialism is or isn't, I think we need to take a look at vulture banks versus credit unions, cooperatives. Richard Wolff has been doing a great job about taking another look about what socialism is and isn't. And cooperatives, that's huge. And, like, for example, in Germany, 850 local cooperatives control most of the energy that powers the country. Most of them, and where they get the financing from credit unions. Yep. So
I'm with you, Dave. You said it very well. And if you've got your money in a bank, particularly in one of the big banks, I strongly encourage you to get it out and put it into a credit union. Credit unions are great, and you become actually a member. You can even run for the board. Curtis in Chicago. Hey, Curtis, what's on your mind?
Hey, Tom, I just wanted to corroborate what you said. I had a client who years ago who went down to finish her antiviral studies and getting her PhD in immunology, and she specifically went to Cuba in order to finish her studies because, as you said, they export and they are expert in that. And having been there, it occurred to me that, there's a big stark contrast between need and want. And all of the basic Maslow's hierarchy of needs were met. Food, clothing, shelter, education, everything else. Certainly there were some creature comforts that people don't enjoy there. But in terms of not being in the rat race, as it were, to have those basic needs met, it was fantastic. An African-American man, it was the first time, having traveled to Central America and Asia, that I personally experienced not bearing witness to a caste system based on race. So it may not be perfect, but in my experience, it was liberating.
Yeah, Louise and I had a similar experience. I mean, that racism. Racism is pretty much everywhere, but in Cuba, they really do not tolerate it. They absolutely don't tolerate it. And they have created a culture there that is transracial. I guess I don't know what the appropriate word would be, but anti-racist certainly, and that's a good thing. Plus, as you said, the bottom half of Maslow's hierarchy of needs. If you get sick, you are taken care of. If you are young, you are educated. If you are hungry, you are given food. If you're in need of shelter, you are given housing. It's just that simple. And this is what Franklin Roosevelt proposed in his second Bill of Rights speech in 1946, or maybe it was 45. Curtis, thank you so much for the call. It's great to hear from you, and thanks for listening to WCPT. And thank you all for being with us today. What a fascinating day. Tonight's going to be the debate. We'll pick up our conversation on that tomorrow. Is Mark Pocan going to be with us tomorrow, Sean? Yep, Congressman Mark Pocan will also be taking your calls for the hour. So it's going to be a great day tomorrow. Tune back in. And in the meantime, don't forget, democracy is not a spectator sport. It doesn't magically fall out of the sky. It's something that requires hard work from you and me, all of us. So get out there, get active, tag You're It, and tell your friends how to find good progressive media. Thank you. We'll see you tomorrow.
You've been listening to Thom Hartmann. For audio and video archives, visit thomhartmann.com.
We say fight back!